Chapter 1279 Escape and Counterkill. Cultivation level was not equivalent to battle prowess. Ling Han was sure that this man that was pointing his sword at him had to be a 3-star genius at least, or even a 4-star genius. At present, he was definitely incapable of matching this kind of elite. In truth, his battle prowess had only reached the peak stage of the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, and taking into consideration that Heaven's Might had weakened the other by a sub-minor level, he could only match an opponent in the early stage of the consummate level. Of course, if the Misty Soul Capturing Flower was effective, that would be another story. However, in a head-on clash, Ling Han did not doubt in the slightest that he would be slashed into halves by the other party. Never doubt the destructive ability of a sword cultivator. Ling Han's present physique was only slightly above level 7 godly metal, and had not reached the extent of level 8 yet. And even if he had reached level 8, if the other's battle prowess could really surpass 3 to 4 stars, he would still be capable of considerable destructiveness against level 8 godly metal. Ling Han directly drew out the Misty Soul Capturing Flower. Instantly, the spirits of the 10 people on the scene were all captured, but it was only a mere instant. The 4 elites from the Heaven Sword Palace and the Absolute Saber Sect all had clear eyes. Those that had cultivated Sword Heart, Saber Heart, and had reached the illumination level all had sturdy spirits. It was much too difficult to affect their spirit. This was also why sword and saber cultivators were so troublesome. They lived only for killing, and had long since severed their other emotions, so it was very difficult to move their spirit. Of course, this was also because these 4 people had cultivation levels high enough. Otherwise, the Misty Soul Capturing Flower would still have effect on them. Die! A sword slashed over. 4 suns and moons all shone with bright light, creating a frightening power. Fuck! When he saw that the Misty Soul Capturing Flower was ineffective, Ling Han knew that things were not good. He quickly put away the demonic flower, and began to break out of the siege using the star-plucking step. Where are you going? The remaining 3 people from the Absolute Saber Sect and Heaven Sword Palace all brandished their weapons in a strike at the same time, and the remaining 6 people all returned to their senses after the Misty Soul Capturing Flower had been put away. They all paled drastically, and began their respective attacks as well. This brat actually had this kind of unusual item on him. If it were not for the fact that they had 4 companions who had cultivated Sword Heart and Saber Heart, they would probably have fallen for this trick. Who knew, they might have even died here. The moment they thought that they could have possibly died so carelessly in the hands of a junior, they all flew into rage out of humiliation, wanting nothing more but to tear Ling Han into a million pieces. Ling Han did not zealously continue fighting, and instead put his all into breaking out of the siege. Can you leave? The 10 great elites all humphed coldly. The weakest among them was in the early stage of the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, and if the 10 of them joined forces, it was enough to kill any cultivator in the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. What more when he was just in the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier? Hong, various attacks intertwined, incredibly dazzling with their brightness. Pang pang pang. Ling Han was repeatedly hit, but after he forcefully took a few heavy blows, he finally tore through the siege, and successfully escaped. There were quite a few bloody holes in his body, but he was still indifferent and said, "I will remember this debt. I will seek out each of you for repayment in future." The 10 people from the 5 sects were all astonished. He was still alive even after all. Fuck that. If it had been them, they would definitely have died with any one of those attacks, yet a medium extreme cultivator actually survived, and still managed to threaten them coldly. A coldness rose up in their hearts. This brat definitely could not be left alive. You will only die here today, so what future would you still have? The 10 people moved, determined to kill Ling Han. This was not just for eliminating a future powerful foe, but also for the great secret that Ling Han possessed. They would absolutely not believe that a lowly commoner from a small world could reach this step just with his own merits. He must have hidden some astonishing fated opportunity. Who knew? It might really be the inheritance of the Heavenly River King. Ling Han humphed, and used the star-plucking step, running with all his might. The 10 members of the 5 sects hurriedly pursued, but the moment they started the pursuit, they realized they actually could not catch up with Ling Han. Not only were they unable to catch up to him, the distance was still continuously increasing. Such a fast movement technique definitely cannot be used for long. Give chase, we must eliminate this disaster. If we do not get rid of this brat, We will not be able to rest or eat in peace. Yet Ling Han very soon disappeared without a trace. The 10 people were helpless, and could only separate to search for him. After Ling Han had escaped, he had already hidden in the Black Tower. He did not enter into the Black Tower at the first instant, firstly because he did not want to reveal the secret of the Black Tower, and secondly because he did not want to depend too much on the Black Tower, hiding inside the moment he met with danger. He channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, and the injuries of his body immediately recovered at a visible pace. In truth, he was very seriously wounded. Those were 10 elites at the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier, and a few of them had not just reached the peak stage of the consummate level, but were even 3-star geniuses and 4-star geniuses. One blow from them, and his blood and flesh was sent flying. Even his godly bones had almost been broken by the attacks. He rubbed his neck. That elite from the Heaven's Sword Palace almost severed his head with a single strike. With the use of the indestructible true fluid, the injury had already recovered, but Ling Han still felt lingering fear. If it were not for the fact that his godly bones were strong enough, his head would definitely have been separated from his body by now. Ha! He was in the Black Tower, but his vision was not affected. He discovered that there was a person running towards him, and it was precisely that old woman from the Earth Dragon sect. Even though she was holding a walking stick, her speed was incredibly fast. It was as if she could shrink the distance, covering more than 300 meters with a single step. She was alone. Ling Han smirked coldly. Just right, he had suffered such a heavy loss, so he was just thinking of venting his ire on someone. The old woman suddenly stopped. She had the bloodline of the Earth Dragon, and was very sensitive to smells. She could vaguely smell Ling Han's scent, but when she reached this place, it had suddenly vanished. How strange. Could it be that he had tunneled into the ground? She released a battle cry, wanting to summon her other companions. However, just at this moment, a sword light suddenly flashed, bringing with it endless killing intent and slashing down at her neck. What? The old woman was incredibly astonished. There was obviously not one person in this place, so where did this sword light come from? She forcibly brandished her walking stick to meet the incoming sword light, and when she turned, she saw that this sword was held in the hand of a young man. It was Ling Han. She was stunned and furious. She had not thought that not only had Ling Han not fled in defeat, he actually dared to hide here to ambush her. Yet his methods of concealing himself were really too good. Even she had not found him, and at this time, she was concentrating fully on sensing Ling Han's disappeared aura, so this could be considered a time when her defenses were the lowest. This strike was earth-shattering, a major disaster so frightening it was indescribable. Pang! Her walking stick still parried the sword strike, but because she had moved in a hurry, her power was inadequate. Instantly, this strike sent her walking stick flying. However, she also managed to gain some time, her figure hurriedly retreating. Ling Han approached. Because the two of them were too near to each other, he did not have the space to brandish his sword. He simply allowed the divine demon sword to leave his hand and automatically attack, while he shot out his fists in a series of punches at the old woman. The old woman was desperate to stay alive, and shielded herself with her arms as she hurriedly retreated. She absolutely did not have the time to wonder why Ling Han, who had just been severely wounded, could look like he was completely unharmed in an instant. At this time, the battle cry echoed out endlessly, and the other 9 people were also rapidly rushing over. The old woman was elated. As long as she could hold on for just a little bit longer, when her reinforcements reached, the attacking and defending positions would switch, and it would be Ling Han's turn to try to escape with all his might. You will not have the chance. Ling Han smirked coldly, and the misty soul-capturing flower suddenly appeared. The old woman was shocked, and hurriedly wanted to close her eyes. However, this demonic flower had direct effect on the divine sense, so there was absolutely no difference whether you closed your eyes or not. In the instant she closed her eyes, she saw 9 figures rushing towards her from various directions. However, this was also the last scene that she would see in her life. Pang! Ling Han smashed the old woman's head with a single punch, and even her spirit was destroyed as well. He looked coldly at the remaining 9 people from the 5 sects, and used a motion technique to sprint madly without the slightest hesitation, endlessly stretching out the distance between himself and the other 9 people in an instant. Chapter 1280 High Bounty.
When the other 9 members of the 5 sects ran to the old woman, they all stopped. Each of their faces was covered with ice, with a sliver of indescribable coldness.
The 10 of them had joined forces, and Ling Han still managed to flee.
Not only had he successfully fled, he had taken advantage of the time when they had separated to pursue him, and turned the tables around to kill one of them.
It should be known that Ling Han previously had been severely wounded. What a frightening physique, what frightening recovery ability, what frightening schemes, and what frightening decisiveness. Faced with this kind of enemy, all 9 felt their hearts grow heavy. This brat has to be gotten rid of as soon as possible. That's right, or we will all have a tragic end. The 9 of them looked at the old woman's body, whose head had been smashed, and felt their hearts shudder. They felt sympathy that came from seeing a peer killed in this way. This kind of thing could possibly happen to them as well. Even the 4 people from the Heaven Sword Palace and Absolute Saber sect, who had cultivated Sword Heart and Saber Heart and severed their other emotions, unmoved by external factors, could feel a full body shiver. That was because Ling Han did not only possess the misty soul-capturing flower, but his abilities on their own were even more amazing. Perhaps Ling Han would have the strength to overthrow the 5 sects in another 100 years. To Sun Moon Tears, 100 years' time was really much too fast, and it was completely impossible that there would appear a genius that could save them from their desperate crisis in the 5 sects in this little bit of time. The time given was much too short. This was the scary thing about top-grade prodigies.
100 years might only seem like a blink of an eye to you, wherein nothing would change, but for a prodigy, it was enough time for an explosive improvement to appear in their strength.
Spare no expense, find this brat and kill him. All 9 forced out through gritted teeth. It was no longer a matter of pride, and not about how they could snatch away his fated opportunity after they killed him. It had become a problem of their own survival. There was no one who would be willing to wait for death, especially in the case of elites like them. They would definitely counterattack madly. After Ling Han ran a distance away, he once again entered into the Black Tower. He was very pleased with himself. Despite being ganged up on by 10 elites, he still managed to get rid of one. However, this was done with the help of the misty soul-capturing flower. I myself am still not strong enough. Ling Han very soon suppressed his self-satisfaction, and reflected on himself. 3 months' time is almost up again. Small Tower appeared, and informed Ling Han that he could enter into the immortal flame cauldron to temper himself again. Ling Han shivered, yet still stood up without hesitation. Running in a panic due to being hunted down by the 5 sects caused him to be even more determined to pursue true strength. He threw himself into the cauldron to be tempered by the immortal flame. 3 days later, Ling Han came out of the cauldron. Naturally, he was still an infant, but looked to be about 10 months old. Allow me to correct. If you can maintain this kind of rate of improvement, you will be able to completely grasp rising from the ashes after about 100 more times, Small Tower said. That was right. A few hundred times dropped to 100 times could be considered a massive improvement. Yet Ling Han's expression was still dark. He had to go through this 100 times to be able to complete tempering his body with immortal flame. Just the thought of it made him nauseous. But he had just tempered his body with the immortal flame, so he forced himself not to think about it. Ling Han drew out the Berserk Blood Spirit pill and ate it. This was his main motive in agreeing to temper his body with the immortal flame. He needed more power. Under the reincarnation tree, 3 days were equivalent to 3 years. Ling Han stood up. His cultivation level had progressed 1 step further and reached the late stage of the medium extreme, while his battle prowess had soared up to the early stage of the consummate level. Added with the help of Heaven's Might and the Divine Demon Sword, he could even fight someone in the late stage of the consummate level. However, I will still be a bit weak against an opponent in the peak stage of the consummate level. What more when the 5 sects still have elites whose battle prowess surpasses the peak stage, and their number is very astonishing as well. Ling Han was not self-satisfied. If his cultivation level could advance into the consummate level, then he would truly be capable of looking down on the 5 sects. I'll use the trash from the 5 sects to test out my battle prowess. Ling Han left the Black Tower, and took the initiative to make trouble with the 5 sects. The moment he appeared, he found out that the 5 sects had really spared no expense to look for him now. Anyone from Wolffang City received a bounty notice. If they found Ling Han, and revealed his location to the 5 sects,
they would be given a realm spirit stone as reward. Though Wolfang City had a law that stated that immortals were not allowed to have internecine strife, the five sects were only looking for Ling Han, and did not state that they wanted to do anything to Ling Han, though everyone knew that it definitely would not be anything good. Though the two-realm battlefield was huge, there were also many people. Soon, someone discovered Ling Han's whereabouts and passed the information to the five sects, and the members of the five sects immediately charged over. After a bloody battle, Ling Han successfully broke through the siege. Though he suffered serious injuries, he also took the lives of two elites in the early stage of the consummate level of the other side, showing his character trait of being unwilling to take a loss in the slightest. This battle brought fear to the five sects because they discovered much to their shock that Ling Han had become even stronger. Only a mere few months had passed, and Ling Han's power had actually improved so apparently. This was too astonishing. The five sects had gone crazy, and began to search for Ling Han even more urgently, willing to spare no expense to destroy Ling Han. If it was not because they could not pay the price, they even wanted to ask heavenly body tier elites to move, and that would ensure their success. However, Ling Han went to the camp of the Purple Moon Army. He had not seen the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden for a long time, and the latter had to know that the five sects were currently targeting him. He had to meet the beauty at least once and reassure her. Holding the token, Ling Han entered into the Purple Moon Army. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was just worrying about him, and had just completed a huge mission with the army. Thus, she decided to ask for a few days of leave, and planned to have a good reunion with Ling Han. Ling Han was naturally greatly pleased. Unfortunately, he had still not completely grasped rising from the ashes at this moment, so his true physique was only as big as a baby of 10 months old. He did not even have the ability to push her down, or have her push him down instead, so he could only be like a eunuch who made a trip to the brothel, unable to do anything. The couple shared a sweet time, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was extremely stunned by Ling Han's rate of advancement. She knew that Ling Han was the Alchemy Emperor, but he could not have been as fast as this even with divine pills. Come, I'll show you something good. Ling Han brought the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden into the Black Tower, and showed her the reincarnation tree as well as that saint that could no longer be considered a saint. However, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was still extremely stunned. What kind of good fortune had actually befallen on Ling Han that even the incomplete spirit of a saint was staying inside his spatial god tool? In comparison, the fact that Ling Han possessed a spatial god tool seemed to be insignificant because saints could forge spatial god tools. When I break through to the heavenly body tier, I can go into seclusion here. But as for now, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden shook her head. Her breakthrough was different as she needed to accumulate the power of her bloodline. This was something that the reincarnation tree could not help with. The couple talked for a while longer before finally coming out of the Black Tower. Ling Han started a fire, and began barbecuing some precious ingredients. He added the godly medicine from the Black Tower as well as a beard of ginseng from the old ginseng. The old ginseng had plucked it from himself after he advanced into the Sun-Moon tier, so it was really extremely nutritious. However, to extract all the nutritious essence from this pot of ingredients required a very, very long time. After about 2 days, an extraordinary aroma wafted, and could be smelled in a 10 miles radius. Ling Han had just ladled out a bowl of soup for the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden when a small beast popped out from who knew where, drooling as it stared at that bowl of soup. So adorable! Instantly, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's eyes lit up. Probably a root hair. Chapter 1281 Little Beast and Little Bird. Ling Han's eyes swept over it, and a sliver of killing intent immediately seeped into his gaze. This was a creature of the netherworld. Yet he did not make a move. This little beast had just crossed over into the immortal level, and its power was extremely weak. Furthermore, it did not seem to have awakened its intelligence. Otherwise, it was absolutely impossible that it would still approach upon spotting 2 obviously human elites of the Sun-Moon tier. This small beast looked like a cat, covered all over with snow-white fur, soft, bright, and shining with a silvery light. That appearance belonged to the category that one would immediately like it upon a single look. No wonder the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden couldn't help but exclaim in surprise even with her cool, aloof personality. Jiao! Jiao! The little beast called out towards the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, its drool dripping even more quickly. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden looked towards Ling Han, and said, Give it a share as well. Did you not see that it is a creature of the netherworld? Ling Han asked. Still, it is so cute. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden could not resist at all. The little beast released a soft cry. So adorable. Ling Han sighed, and could only draw out a bowl to ladle out a share for this little beast. Then he placed it over and said, Little guy, finish this and run off quickly. A glutton like you should obediently stay in the netherworld. If you came to the immortal realm, wouldn't you just be filling someone's stomach? Little beast immediately began to flick out its tongue to drink the soup. Perhaps it was too delicious, but its head poked in further and further. In the end, it lost its balance, and both its hind legs were sticking upwards. Ling Han was surprised. Even eating, and it still had to act cute. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden would probably be rendered completely incapable of resisting. He turned his head, and true enough, the sympathy in the heavenly phoenix divine maiden's eyes was practically overflowing. The little beast drank very quickly. Being capable of cultivating to the mountain river tier, how could it have no intelligence? Immediately, it chirped out at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden as if it knew that only begging her would be useful. Indeed, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden turned her eyes towards Ling Han, filled with plea. Ling Han sighed, and could only ladle out another bowl. One bowl followed another. This little beast's appetite was quite amazing. Ling Han couldn't help but be moved. It should be known that he used proper ingredients in consideration of the cultivation levels of both himself and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. If it was given to a mountain river tier, they could still eat, but they definitely wouldn't be able to eat too much. Eating so vigorously like the little beast, they would definitely explode from all the richness. But the fact was that this little beast was still very energetic, playing cute and acting coy. There was absolutely no sign that it was about to explode anytime soon. Strange. After this little beast had single-handedly finished off half the meat stew, it was finally satisfied. It ran to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and happily wagged its tail, playing cute right to the very end. Meanwhile, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was feeling extremely compassionate, and picked up the little beast, combing through its fur. She even gave it a massage, infuriating Ling Han. He had never seen this fierce woman treat him so gently before. Little beast seemed to sense Ling Han's unfriendly gaze, and curled in its claws, ducking into heavenly phoenix divine maiden's arms. Don't scare it. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden warned Ling Han. I give it food, I give it drink, and now it's even snatching away my wife. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden once again warned Ling Han seriously, causing him to feel very rueful. He had to quickly increase his cultivation level, or even his wife would be climbing over his head. Just at this moment, a soft cracking sound was heard. Ling Han involuntarily turned his eyes towards that egg that he had kept for who knew how long. Now, as long as he was free, he would take it out for some sunbathing, and that sound had originated from the eggshell. There was a crack. Another sound rang out, and the first crack appeared. Ling Han was greatly pleased. Was this guy finally about to hatch? This was the descendant of the azure flame vulture, and in truth was not of much help to Ling Han by now. However, he had nurtured it by his side for so many days, so he was still very expectant to see a new life break out of its egg. Knock, knock, knock. The azure flame vulture inside pecked continuously, and the eggshell broke gradually. Finally, the head of a small bird stretched out. This time, it did not continue to peck, but rather opened its beak and began to eat the eggshell. Soon, it chewed out a large round hole. This eggshell seemed to be extremely delicious because while the little bird had already eaten out a hole big enough for it to come out, it did not look like it had the slightest intention to stop at all. It was still there eating continuously, causing Ling Han to feel a slight urge to break off a piece to have a taste as well. As a glutton, he felt a heavy pressure. Ling Han, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and the little beast were all staring. Only when the little bird had completely chewed up the eggshell so that not one bit was left did it earnestly stand up on its small legs and look at the surroundings blankly. At first, it tilted its head to look at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden for a while, and then stared at the little beast. Finally, it turned its eyes towards Ling Han, raced towards him on its two little legs, leaned against his leg, and crouched down to rest. Did it think that he was its mommy? Hey. Putting aside the fact that he was male,
What part of him looked like a bird? Fuck, what was wrong with its eyes? Meanwhile, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was thrown over in laughter. This would be the best material to tease Ling Han about in future, and she could talk about it for the rest of her life. Ling Han shook his head and sent the little bird into the Black Tower. He keenly sensed that this azure flame vulture would far surpass its mother in the future. It was said that the azure flame vulture had a sliver of the bloodline from the ancient divine beast, Azure Phoenix. If it could awaken its bloodline, this little bird would be very useful. Lady Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. An exclamation of surprise was heard, and a few people walked over. They were all looking at the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, a burning admiration on their faces. They were disciples of the 5 sects. In the 5 sects, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was definitely a legendary character. She had only been in the immortal realm for 10,000 years, and had already reached the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier already. She was the idol of who knew how many people. However, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had long since began to live in seclusion, and only left behind a stunning legend. Thus, these people were naturally excited at being able to see the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden in this place. But when they spotted the other person next to their idol, all their expressions shifted drastically. Ling Han. He was a monster. In a short few months, there was already a considerable number of elites from their sects that had died in Ling Han's hands, and this man was also a criminal that had opened the sky according to the 5 sects theory. The lower realm was a small world that they had operated for a few million years, producing very astonishing wealth, yet because of Ling Han, all that was now gone forever. Thus, whether they knew the truth or otherwise, all disciples of the 5 sects hated Ling Han very much. Lady Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. This person is Ling Han. He is very dangerous. Leave him quickly. Someone called out to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, fearing that she still did not know Ling Han's true face, and would be wounded if Ling Han went berserk. Yet the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden calmly said, I have long since severed my ties with the Cloud Phoenix sect, and all the matters of the 5 sects are no longer any concern of mine. She had long since repaid the kindness that the Cloud Phoenix sect had shown teaching her, and when the sect had sold her off to Xiaodong Lai, that little bit of remaining kinship she had with the Cloud Phoenix sect had vanished. Those disciples of the 5 sects were stunned and furious. What exactly had Ling Han drugged the Heavenly Phoenix Maiden with that she now did not even recognize her own sect? Chapter 1282 Battling the Sword Emperor. Lady Heavenly Phoenix Maiden, do not be fooled by this evil demon. These disciples all called out as they sent out a signal to summon their other companions. The average power of the disciples of the 5 sects was very strong. For people like them, who had only cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years yet had all advanced into the Sun Moon tier, it was not because they had all awoken their bloodline, but rather because they had taken the realm pill. Of course, it was not complete, but the diluted version. Otherwise, there would not have been enough to be distributed. Yet even so, the overall power of the 5 sects had seen a very large improvement. They were practically no inferior to any other force of the heavenly body tier. Without reaching the Sun Moon tier, they would not have dared to run over to the 2-realm battlefield to hunt Ling Han down. If they were only in the Mountain River tier, they definitely would have been going to their deaths. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden cuddled the little beast and said, You have said all you need to say. If you continue to blabber nonsense, I will definitely not be merciful. Her eyes were menacing. Since she had already severed her relations with the 5 sects, whoever made a move on Ling Han would be attacking her. Heavenly Phoenix Maiden, did you not call yourself the Ling family's widow, and would only live for one person? A bout of laughter rang out from afar. In a mere instant, a young man shot over at an extraordinarily fast pace. He bore a sword that had an ancient air to it on his back, and exuded an aura that seemed otherworldly. Ling Han's eyes swept over this newcomer, and his eyes involuntarily narrowed. The Sword Emperor. 10,000 years ago, there was a total of 7 heaven tiers in the lower realm. They were known as the king tiers of that generation, and the Sword Emperor was ranked in the first place, above both the Setting Sun Saber Emperor and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. In their reunion 10,000 years later, the Sword Emperor had already advanced into the high extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Though he was not as incredible as the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, it was still very, very exaggerated. The realm pill was indeed awesome, but what was more crucial was his own natural talent. Otherwise,
Why would those who had cultivated more tens of thousands of years, or even an additional several hundreds of thousands years, still be in the low extreme of the sun-moon tier? The heavenly phoenix divine maiden looked towards this old rival from the past, her expression unchanging, and said, "Is what I do any concern of yours?"
As she spoke, a few more people rushed over.
This time they were much stronger, and there was no lack of elites in the consummate level of the sun-moon tier.
Ho ho!
The Sword Emperor shook his head, appearing to be disdainful. You praised yourself as being pure and untouched, but weren't you still moved, and gotten involved with another man? Ling Han naturally was unwilling to allow his wife be insulted, even if it was just a misunderstanding. He spoke up. Sword Emperor, we have not met for 10,000 years.
Do you dare battle me?
Sword Emperor.
A great many people were confused. Whom was this evil demon talking to?
Yet the Sword Emperor felt his heartbeat quicken. He had taken this name when he was in the small world, but when he entered into the immortal realm, he took the initiative to remove this nickname and seal it away temporarily, restoring his real name. Otherwise, if he still called himself the Sword Emperor in the immortal realm, wouldn't that be attracting hatred? Was he complaining that he wasn't dying fast enough?
How did this brat know?
Hold on, this brat was also called Ling Han, and furthermore, the heavenly phoenix maiden was willing to become hostile with her sect for his sake. So could it be? A shocking guess rose up in his heart, but there was still a point of doubt, and that was, if Ling Han was that person, how had he passed the time of 10,000 years? This thought merely flashed past, and he had already found his own answer.
Time liquid.
Since the elites of the 5 sects had accumulated their disciples throughout the generations with this item, why could Ling Han not do the same? Very long ago, the 5 sects had once been conquered by Ma Duo Bao. At the time, their foundations had almost been severed, and the time liquid had also all been taken. If Ling Han obtained the time liquid from this channel, then everything could be logically explained.
You are Ling Han.
The Sword Emperor stared at Ling Han. Ling Han knew what he meant, and so said, "Hee, after you requested that I concoct alchemical pills for you, I secretly learnt 3 sword techniques from you, sorry about that." When he said this, the Sword Emperor no longer had any doubts. This Ling Han was not only the criminal who had come through opening the sky, but was also the Alchemy Emperor from 10,000 years ago. No wonder his rate of cultivation was so fast with the best quality alchemical pills available to him every day. How could it not be fast? I never thought that you were actually someone that had long since died. The Sword Emperor's expression became menacing. If I had known that you would have become such a big threat to the sect, I really should have killed you long ago. Though Ling Han was his equal in cultivation level 10,000 years ago, in terms of battle prowess, he really was a joke. Zhang Hang, do you want to die? The heavenly phoenix divine maiden flew into a thunderous rage, her killing intent even stronger than the Sword Emperor's. The Sword Emperor's real name was Zhang Hang. After he came to the immortal realm, he took the name of Zhang Hang, no longer being called the Sword Emperor.
Wife, allow me.
Ling Han restrained the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. He had long since wanted to battle once more with the Sword Emperor and the setting sun Saber Emperor. Now, the Sword Emperor's cultivation level was above his, so it could not be considered as bullying him too much.
This ignited his fighting spirit.
Be careful, he is a 4-star genius, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden said in a low voice. The reason why she had rushed to speak up for him was because she did not want Ling Han to fight the Sword Emperor. Ling Han's battle prowess was at the early stage of the consummate level at most, and he could fight someone in the middle stage of the consummate level, while the Sword Emperor was in the late stage of the high extreme, and was also a 4-star genius at that, so his battle prowess was at about the late stage of the consummate level. His ultimate battle prowess still had a gap of 1 star. This meant that Ling Han would definitely lose. Ling Han nodded and said, "Don't worry. I am still unable to beat you now, but as for this guy, he's just a piece of cake." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden rolled her eyes. This guy was really petty. Didn't she just suppress him a few times in the past? Did he have to keep those few times in mind constantly like this? Sword Emperor, come, let's battle. Ling Han challenged the Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor looked nostalgic and said, "It has been a very long time since I have been called the Sword Emperor. However, there will be one day that I will let this name once again be known." What great ambition! In the immortal realm, Titles like King, Majestic Emperor, and Imperial Emperor could not be used simply like that, because the Royal Empire, Majestic Empire, and Imperial Empire existed. If you used it anyway, you would commit a taboo. For example, if Zhang Hang was to call himself the Sword Emperor, then wouldn't that be the equivalent of placing himself on the same level as Eternal River Tier? What would the Heavenly Body Tiers think about that? A mere Sun-Moon Tier wanted to climb over their heads. That was purely courting death. Now that Zhang Hang said that he would make the name of the Sword Emperor once again become known, it meant that he was confident that he could advance into the Eternal River Tier, and he deserved to be admired merely for this ambitious spirit. Ling Han nodded. This was the Sword Emperor that he knew. He said, "On the basis of our previous relations, I hope you can leave the Heaven Sword Palace and pursue your own path if you lose." "Haha, say this again after you beat me." Zhang Heng drew his sword. Wang, a frightening murderous aura instantly soared into the skies. His fighting spirit and sword intent had fused together, forming a divine sword that seemed capable of even slicing apart the heavens. Ling Han sighed internally. In mere terms of sword Dao, the other's level of mastery was indeed superior to his because of his single-mindedness. Ling Han was studying too many fields. Alchemy occupied a very large part of his concentration, and there was also a considerable number of other assorted fields. However, precisely because of these assorted other fields, the present him was born. Ling Han did not draw the divine demon sword, but rather clenched his hands into fists. Divine patterns appeared on his fists, causing these two fists to grow continuously in size until they became almost like mountains. I punch. He took the initiative to attack. Chapter 1283. Whose sword is stronger? Ling Han threw both of his fists, and they were like two mountains as they bore down on Zhang Hang. Boom! A devastating aura swept forth before Ling Han's fists had even arrived. The space around them collapsed, and the stars and clouds in the sky all lost their luster. The disciples of the 5 sects fled in disarray. Not to mention those at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon Tier. Even those at the medium extreme and high extreme didn't dare to face Ling Han's iron fists head-on. Simply being scraped by them would be enough to wound them severely. Ling Han's physique was as tough as level 7 godly metal, perhaps even stronger. Moreover, the battle right now was completely playing to his strengths and maximizing his advantages. His iron fists arrived before Zhang Heng. However, Zhang Heng was unfazed as he slashed his sword toward the sky. Shwa! A burst of sword chi sliced through the air and slashed into the two mountain-like fists. Wang! Surprisingly, Ling Han's fists were sent reeling back. Strong! In terms of power, he was clearly no match for Zhang Heng. After all, Zhang Heng's cultivation level was far higher than his. Not only that, but he was also a 4-star genius. Thus, Ling Han's power of 6 stars was only equivalent to a 2-star advantage. However, a mere 2 stars weren't enough to overcome the difference in cultivation level between them. 10,000 years ago, you couldn't even withstand a single strike of mine. Now, 10,000 years later, you're still no match for me. Zhang Heng said arrogantly. He advanced with his sword. He hadn't taken the path of becoming one with his weapon. First of all, he still had yet to reach the consummate level. Second of all, he had lofty ambitions, and he wasn't content with being at the Sun-Moon Tier. He wanted to become an Eternal River Tier elite. Thus, he naturally wouldn't fuse his suns and moons into his god tool and sever his own path of cultivation. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, I thought you were going to say that I still couldn't withstand a single strike of yours. If this is all you've got, I'll chop your head off in less than 10 exchanges. Zhang Heng slashed at Ling Han, and it was as if the might of heaven and earth was also circulating with his sword. Ling Han nodded inwardly. In terms of sword Dao alone, Zhang Heng was indeed worthy of being called the Sword Emperor. He was very, very powerful. However, Ling Han wasn't weak, either. Ling Han transformed his fists into fingers. Xiao xiao xiao. He continued to snap his fingers, and bursts of vicious sword chi shot toward Zhang Heng. This was the lightning sword technique. Although he hadn't achieved great accomplishment in the lightning sword technique yet, he had most likely reached small accomplishment already. His technique contained speed and destructiveness, and it was also in harmony with the might of the great Tao. It even contained a wisp of heaven's might. Even if he didn't unleash this technique with his divine demon sword, it would still be as powerful as the strike of a true dragon. It was filled with a domineering aura that yearned to crush the world. Zhang Heng couldn't help but feel surprised. He was a sword wielder as well, and he had devoted his entire life to the sword, had an incredible obsession with the sword Dao. Although Ling Han had formed swords by merely snapping his fingers just then, his strikes had made him feel a profound sword intent. This sword intent was far above his comprehension. He was completely stunned. Although he had given up his title of Sword Emperor, he was still an extremely proud individual. He believed that he was simply limited by his cultivation level. If he were to battle others on an equal footing, he was confident that he could use his sword to defeat any Heavenly Body Tier Elite or Eternal River Tier Elite. However, his confidence was shattered by Ling Han's ferocious sword intent. This person who he had deemed unworthy of being his opponent in the past, had actually surpassed him in the sword Dao. He refused to accept this. Zhang Heng roared as he unleashed the full power of his sword Dao. Sword Qi burst into the air, transforming into countless black blades that slashed at Ling Han. They were as dense as a dark cloud. Ling Han was fearless as he faced this attack head-on. The members of the five sects watched on in utter shock. Most of them had never seen Ling Han before, and they had only heard of his terrible deeds. Right now, they couldn't help but feel stunned with his ability to hold his own against Zhang Heng. This was absolutely incredible. Although Zhang Heng was only at the high extreme, his battle prowess had already soared to the consummate level. In fact, even many senior elites were no match for him. He was known as the strongest rising star of the Heaven Sword Palace, and he enjoyed an equally great reputation with the Heavenly Phoenix Maiden. However, Ling Han's strength was only on the same level as Zhang Heng. So why did the five sects treat him with such caution? Why had they deployed all of their elites to deal with just a single person? Just look at the scenes before them. It was clear that Zhang Heng was enjoying an advantage over him. If this fight continued, the loser would definitely be Ling Han. Just Zhang Heng alone was enough to deal with him. So, why were the five sects making so much fuss? However, Zhang Heng knew otherwise. He was indeed enjoying an advantage over Ling Han, but this was only because he possessed a higher cultivation level. In terms of sword Dao alone, he had already lost. How can such a profound sword technique exist? How can it combine speed and power so seamlessly? There was an unbearable itch in his heart. As someone who was obsessed with the sword, he was willing to pay any price to learn the profound secret of Ling Han's sword technique. Enough! Since this is the limit of that brat's abilities, let's attack together and kill him. This was an elder who had been observing the battle from the sidelines. After observing for a long time, he had concluded that this was the limit of Ling Han's strength. This made him feel much more at ease. In any case, they weren't here to battle Ling Han one-on-one. They were here to kill this demon who might shake the five sects' foundations in the future. Several consummate-level elites stepped forward. They knew that Ling Han possessed huge secrets, and this was an opportunity to help the five sects soar into the sky. If they obtained his secrets, perhaps they could advance to the Heavenly Body Tier or even the Eternal River Tier. Fall back! The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden shouted. Boom! The projection of two phoenix wings that measured almost 500 meters each unfurled from her back. However, they burned with real flames, and this further highlighted her breathtaking beauty. She was like a stunningly beautiful war goddess. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, are you really going to betray us? Several elders chided. They were so infuriated that they were almost about to vomit blood. In their minds, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was only as powerful as she was thanks to the help of the five sects. However, not only was she not repaying the five sects, but she was even helping their biggest enemy. This was despicable to the extreme. If you take another step, I'll consider you my enemy, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said menacingly. She had barely received any benefits from the Cloud Phoenix sect. In any case, she completely loathed realm pills. It was because her bloodline had awakened that she was able to advance to the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier in such a short amount of time. The elders exchanged a glance before nodding in tacit understanding. They definitely couldn't let Ling Han escape. What would they do if he went into hiding and reappeared after tens of thousands of years? With his freakish talents, He would be able to crush the 5 sects once he reached the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. Elder Yu, Elder Qian, you two hold the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden back. Everyone else, follow me and capture that brat. Understood. The elders immediately launched into action. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was infuriated, and balls of flames curled through the air as she flapped her wings, releasing a formidable might. She was only at the consummate level, but her bloodline meant that these flames possessed a wisp of the true Phoenix's devastating might. Thus, these flames were naturally terrifying. This was a suppression from a superior level. The elders groaned at the same time, a pained expression spreading across their faces. They were completely speechless. Against someone with a stronger bloodline, they were at a disadvantage before they had even started fighting. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden lashed out with her palm as she dashed forward. There was the cry of a phoenix, and a multicolored phoenix suddenly materialized in the air and swooped toward the members of the 5 sects. This phoenix was enveloped in divine flames. Charge! The members of the 5 sects roared. Since the Heavenly Phoenix Maiden refused to see reason, they would simply kill her alongside Ling Han. Chapter 1284 We, LL Battle Another Day. The thought process of the members of the 5 sects was extremely simple. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was only at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, so they would definitely be able to contain her if not suppress her if enough of them charged over. However, their understanding of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was restricted to what they knew about her several thousand years ago. At that time, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had chosen to go into seclusion after deciding that she had already repaid the Cloud Phoenix sect. Back then, she had only been at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Many years had now passed, and the 5 sects all knew that she had already advanced to the consummate level. However, they speculated that she was at most at the early stage or middle stage. After all, the higher one's cultivation, the harder it would be to advance. In reality, however, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had already reached the peak stage of the consummate level. Not only that, but she was even a 4-star genius. Even ordinary cultivators at the peak stage of the consummate level wouldn't be able to withstand a single strike of hers, so how could cultivators below the peak stage stand up to her? Wails of agony reverberated around the areas that had been engulfed by the flaming phoenix. The members of the 5 sects clasped their heads as they fled, and even a few elites at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier stumbled back in retreat, not daring to face her attacks head-on. What can we do? We can't even deal with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, so how are we going to capture Ling Han? Why are the reinforcements still not here? An elder asked angrily. This was a nonsensical question. Right now, numerous members of the 5 sects were scattered all over the 2-realm battlefield, searching for Ling Han. It would definitely take longer than 2 days to notify all of them. After they were notified, they would still need to hurry back. Anyhow, they were unable to capture Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden even with such a huge advantage in numbers. Thus, the elder was naturally beside himself with fury. However, Zhang Hing suddenly stopped attacking and asked, "Is this your full strength?" "No," Ling Han replied with a shake of his head. He still hadn't taken full advantage of his powerful physique yet, nor had he used his freakish recovery ability. Moreover, he still had the Misty Soul Capturing Flower, although it would most likely be useless against Zhang Heng. In any case, he still had many more trump cards. At least he still hadn't started to ingest alchemical pills yet. Zhang Heng looked up at the sky. He was indeed enjoying an advantage at this moment. However, he was unable to suppress Ling Han no matter what he did. His opponent was astonishingly resilient, and he could easily take everything that he threw at him. He nodded and said, "From today onward, I'll travel the world in search of a sword Dao that truly belongs to me. The day that I achieve great accomplishment is the day that I'll come back to challenge you. I hope you're still alive at that time." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Fine. If you don't find me here, you can go to the Great Ling Empire of the Joint Peace Planet. That's my territory." "I'll keep that in mind," Zhang Heng said with a nod. He sheathed his sword before turning around and leaving. He appeared especially relaxed and carefree. "Zhang Heng!" The higher-ups of the 5 sects roared in fury. Why was there another traitor among them? Ling Han smiled and said, You people should thank him for keeping your inheritances alive. After all of you will be killed by me. Brat, you're merely riding on the coattail of a woman. What is there to be smug about? One of the mighty figures roared. He wanted to provoke Ling Han and anger him into asking the heavenly phoenix maiden to stand aside. Ling Han laughed and said, "If you want, you can also ride on the coattail of a woman. I don't mind at all." Fuck! The members of the 5 sects all seethed with anger. The key point was that the heavenly phoenix divine maiden had been one of them before. Yet, she had now defected to Ling Han. How could they not grit their teeth in anger? Ling Han's expression suddenly became cold, and he said, "I've come to collect some interest today." If these people had cultivated normally, how could they have reached the sun-moon tier at such a young age? They had definitely ingested realm pills. He would kill them without mercy. Ling Han charged over, snapping his fingers as he did so. Xiao xiao xiao. Bursts of sword chi rained down on his enemies. Ah! Swathes of disciples instantly collapsed to the ground. Many of them weren't at the consummate level yet, so how could they withstand such a devastating attack? They were dead before they had even hit the ground. The elders were enraged. They tried to rush toward Ling Han to protect their disciples, yet the heavenly phoenix divine maiden beat her wings and flew over, sending searing flames through the air. The elders had no choice but to stop and battle her with their full strength. After a few seconds, the disciples of the 5 sects all became corpses on the ground. The elders were the only remaining survivors. Ling Han stopped attacking. Although the heavenly phoenix divine maiden had already split with the 5 sects, it was clear that she still hadn't steeled her heart to kill them. Ling Han didn't want to pressure her into killing them, either. However, he wasn't strong enough to kill these elders himself, so he naturally stopped attacking. "Let's go," Ling Han said as he wrapped his arm around the heavenly phoenix divine maiden's willowy waist. She shuddered slightly, and a deep blush appeared on her beautiful face. Hiss! The little beast in her lap bared its teeth at Ling Han as if it were feeling threatened. This man was trying to steal its woman. What are hissing for? Ling Han flicked the little beast's head, causing it to clasp its head and groan in pain. "Don't bully him," the heavenly phoenix divine maiden said unhappily. "Fine, my yearning of 10,000 years is no match for a little beast's acting cute for a few hours. What a failure." Ling Han glared at the little beast and thought, "When I reunite with Rabbit and the old ginseng, I've got to persuade them to kill this little beast. We'll enjoy a delicious netherworld beast meal." This little beast actually dared to target his wife. Ling Han's glare caused a cold chill to shoot up the little beast's spine. It couldn't help but shudder. Meanwhile, the elders from the 5 sects were seething with rage. So be it if you two have turned the tables. However, is there really any need for you to act all lovey-dovey in front of us? Just how little do you think of us? However, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was indeed like a lofty mountain that couldn't be overcome. If they wanted to resist her, they would need a genuine great elite. The few of them were far from enough. They could only look on wide-eyed as Ling Han and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden disappeared into the distance. Without enough elites, there was no way they could contain the two of them. However, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden waved goodbye to Ling Han after accompanying him a short while. She had used up all of her holidays, and thus she had to return to the army encampment. She was a soldier after all, so her freedom to come and leave would naturally be restricted. She would obviously regain her freedom if she left the army, but the threat of the Xie clan meant that the Purple Moon Army was probably the safest place for her to be. Otherwise, she could only stay in Ling Han's Black Tower. However, this would similarly restrict her freedom. The little beast was naturally taken away by the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Anyhow, even if she had been willing to give it to Ling Han, it was very likely that the little beast wouldn't have dared to follow him. He was someone who might kill and make it into a stew at any time. Ling Han continued to wander around. He had received the blessing of heaven and earth after opening the sky, and this blessing was finally displaying its usefulness at this moment. He was able to find Realm Spirit Stone after Realm Spirit Stone. Moreover, there was a certain pattern to his discoveries. It would be extremely easy for him to find Realm Spirit Stones in areas where the regulations of the immortal realm were dominant. On the contrary, He hadn't found a single realm spirit stone in the areas where the regulations of the netherworld were dominant. This made a lot of sense. The blessing of heaven and earth that he had received had come from the immortal realm. In other words, it had nothing to do with the netherworld. Thus, in areas where the regulations of the netherworld were dominant, his luck was no different from other ordinary people's. After discovering this, Ling Han tried his best to search through the areas where the regulations of the immortal realm were dominant. Sure enough, he was able to find more and more realm spirit stones. In just a month, he had already managed to find 9 realm spirit stones. Although they were only as large as a pinky, the fact that he had found so many was still astounding. After some days, he finally reunited with Rabbit and the old ginseng. While they were strolling through the battlefield, the earth suddenly started to tremor as if some mountain had collapsed. Fuck! It's the Netherworld army! An army appeared before them, and it consisted of at least 10,000 soldiers, the weakest of them at the Sun-Moon tier. Moreover, there were at least 100 heavenly body tier elites. Is the Netherworld seeking an all-out war? Chapter 1285 All-Out Assault. An army of 1 million soldiers, all of them at the Sun-Moon tier. Moreover, the generals that led them were all heavenly body tier elites. It was a formidable army that was capable of crushing their enemies. The fact that heavenly body tier elites had now been deployed was a frightening development. With them in the front lines, would Eternal River tier elites be far behind? Was a calamitous war about to descend? Ling Han couldn't help but grimace. Was he a bringer of misfortune? It seemed like trouble would brew wherever he went. Humph! Someone in the Netherworld army discovered Ling Han, and 100 or so people immediately flew over, all of them wielding weapons that radiated with a sinister aura. Run! Ling Han immediately shouted. He wasn't scared of these 100 or so people. However, there were heavenly body tier elites in the Netherworld army, and he was definitely no match for these beings. Staying behind and fighting wouldn't be bravery, it would be stupidity. Rabbit and old ginseng didn't need Ling Han's reminder at all. They had started to flee before he had even shouted in warning. Fuck! You two are so loyal! Ling Han shouted as he hurriedly activated the star-plucking step. You're the strongest out of us 3. If you don't stay back to fight, who will? The old ginseng said. Exactly, Rabbit said in agreement. Stop! The Netherworld soldiers shouted. They pursued Ling Han and the others with vigor, yet the distance between them grew larger and larger. The difference in their speed was significant. Ling Han and the others fled far into the distance. However, just when they thought they had shaken off their pursuers, they heard a soft humph, and a person silently appeared before them. This person was dressed in white, and he was an extremely handsome man. If it weren't for his overwhelmingly sinister aura, one wouldn't be able to tell that he was a netherworld being. Anyhow, such a powerful and sinister aura indicated that this man possessed a very high cultivation level. He was a heavenly body tier elite. Ling Han's heart shuddered in apprehension. He reached out and grabbed Rabbit and the old ginseng, one in each hand. He was prepared to enter the Black Tower at any moment. Now that he was facing such a powerful elite, there was no time for him to worry about exposing the secret of the Black Tower. There's no need to be so tense. I'm only here to ask you a question, the man in white said with a smile. His charismatic smile revealed his brilliant white teeth. Ling Han also smiled and said, What will you do after asking the question? I'll naturally kill you all. This information is far too sensitive, and I can't leave any survivors, the man in white said calmly. Fuck! Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Fine, ask away. Young man, you're very courageous, the man in white exclaimed. He stared at Ling Han for a moment, and a look of surprise involuntarily spread across his face. What cultivation technique are you practicing? It's actually able to return you to youth? As a heavenly body tier elite, he could naturally see through Ling Han's disguise. This was unlike the heavenly phoenix maiden, who had only noticed that there was something strange about Ling Han. However, she hadn't been able to put her finger on what was wrong. Ling Han's expression became serious, and he said, The cultivation technique that I practice is the most profound in heaven and earth, and it's peerless throughout the past and future. It's none other than the heavenly mystery technique. The man in white laughed heartily and said, "Young man, you're like a newborn calf that isn't afraid of tigers. You even dare to joke around with me. So be it, I'll directly pluck your soul. That way, I'll find out about all your secrets." He reached over, and his hand transformed into a vast expanse of sky that bore down upon Ling Han.
What was going on? How had the three of them suddenly disappeared? If they had used a teleportation talisman, he should have been able to detect the fluctuations caused by the tearing of space. Spatial God Tool? He scanned the surroundings. As small as spatial God Tools could become, there should still be clues that revealed their location.
However, he couldn't find anything out of the ordinary no matter how carefully he scanned the surrounding land.
I don't believe this. He grabbed the earth within a 500-kilometer radius, and then used his profound power to refine the earth into nothingness. After obliterating everything else, the last remaining matter would naturally be the spatial God Tool.
The power of heavenly body tier elites was incredible, and the earth in this place only consisted of ordinary dirt and stones.
So, how could it withstand his refinement? The man in white easily obliterated the mountain of earth into nothingness. Doing so only took him a mere 3 days.
However, after refining all this land, a look of pure astonishment spread across on the man in white's face.
He hadn't found any spatial God Tool. How is this possible? Perhaps he didn't hide in a spatial God Tool? He murmured to himself. But there's no way he could have used a teleportation talisman. He wasn't willing to give up, and he continued to scour the surroundings. However, he came up empty-handed. If this were some other time, he wouldn't mind scouring this place for 4 or 5 years. After all, the lifespan of heavenly body tier elites was incredibly long. However, he was shouldering an important mission at this moment.
"I'll deal with the proper matters first," he muttered.
After reaching this decision, he took a huge step and appeared hundreds of kilometers in the distance. Ling Han, Rabbit, and the old ginseng all breathed a long sigh of relief. If the man in white had decided to stay here, they wouldn't have dared to come back out at all. Strange, why is the netherworld suddenly launching an all-out assault? Ling Han asked in confusion. Although this was the two-realm battlefield, where battle and death were extremely common, deploying an army of 1 million sun-moon tier cultivators and thousands of heavenly body tier elites was still very surprising. Doing so would elevate the conflict from small skirmishes to all-out war. So be it if there are heavenly body tier elites. However, if eternal river tier elites join in, even heavenly body tier elites will become nothing but cannon fodder. Ling Han's mind turned to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden.
She was in the Purple Moon Army at this moment, and such an army would definitely have to join the battlefield if a war did eventually break out.
With the severity of the current situation, it wouldn't matter whether one had retired or not. They would be forced to enter the battlefield regardless.
No, I have to hurry back to her.
Ling Han reached a decision in his mind. He exited the Black Tower and hurried back to Wolfang City. The 3 legions were all camped outside Wolfang City, and they protected this line of defense with a curved horn formation. Once this line of defense fell, the netherworld would be able to march through the city and invade the entire Cloud Apex planet. Ling Han was as quick as the wind, and he arrived at the encampment of the Purple Moon Army in no time at all. However, upon his arrival, he discovered that the encampment was already devoid of people. It was clear that the Purple Moon Army had already been deployed to meet the Netherworld Army. It seems like the problem is far more severe than I had thought. Ling Han muttered to himself. By the looks of it, the Netherworld had even deployed Eternal River tier elites. Otherwise, there was no way the entire Purple Moon Army would have been deployed. I'll enter Wolfang City to gather more information first. He turned around to enter Wolfang City. Upon entering, he was subject to strict examinations and questioning. Moreover, the entire city was filled with a thick aura of killing intent. The streets weren't bustling with people as they usually were, with the passers-by all appearing hurried as they rushed to their destinations. Their faces were filled with worry and anxiety. Ling Han stopped a mountain river tier passerby. He tossed him a true origin stone before asking, "What's going on? Why is everyone so tense?" The man caught the true origin stone and hurriedly put it away. He then respectfully said, "Sir, you've probably come from an outside city, right?
You won't believe this, the Netherworld has launched an all-out assault, and their army is being led by 3 Eternal River Tier generals. They advanced several thousand kilometers in a single day, and it's only a matter of time before they arrive at the foot of Wulfang City. 3 Eternal River Tier elites. Gasp. No wonder the entire Purple Moon army was deployed. It's extremely likely that the 2 other legions have also been fully deployed. Otherwise, how can they withstand an army of 1 million that's led by 3 Eternal River Tier elites? Is an all-out war about to erupt? Chapter 1286 Using Public Office to Avenge a Private Resentment. Following the Netherworld's invasion, the higher-ups of Wulfang City issued a notice stating that everyone had to report to the 3 armies within 3 days of receiving the notice. There, they would receive commands from the generals and fight together against the Netherworld. This time, it didn't matter whether one had retired from the army or not, nor did it matter how many merit points they had accumulated. All Immortal Realm elites still present in the 2-realm battlefield were obligated to participate in the battle against the Netherworld. Moreover, an urgent call for reinforcements had already been issued, and it wouldn't be long before more elites arrived at the 2-realm battlefield. The Netherworld had suddenly elevated the small skirmishes into a full-blown war, and it was crucial that all the elites on Cloud Apex Planet were mobilized to participate in the resistance. Ling Han immediately rushed to the front lines as well. Everyone had a responsibility to fight against the Netherworld's invasion. This was a clash between 2 realms, and the beings on Cloud Apex Planet would definitely be massacred if the Netherworld were to conquer the planet. The Netherworld wouldn't refine the Cloud Apex Planet into a realm pill, but what they did certainly wouldn't be any less brutal. Whatever they did, widespread death and destruction would be inevitable. Ling Han arrived at the front lines, only to see a tense standoff between 2 large armies. One of the armies was naturally from the Immortal Realm. This army was 700,000 strong, and it consisted of soldiers from the Purple Moon Army, Wind Rider's Army, and Holy Army, as well as a large number of mercenaries. However, the quality of the soldiers was varying and uneven. Some were at the Mountain River tier, while some were at the Sun Moon tier. However, at least half of the soldiers were at the Mountain River tier. This caused the overall quality of the army to fall drastically. In fact, the Immortal Realm army was absolutely no match for their opponent. The Netherworld army was 1 million strong, and all of their soldiers were at the Sun Moon tier. This stark contrast revealed just how terrifying a force the Netherworld had unleashed upon the Immortal Realm. The Netherworld possessed a crushing advantage. At this moment, Ling Han didn't have the spare time to worry about his personal affairs. He didn't search for the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, instead entering the army encampment and reporting his arrival. He didn't ask for any special treatment, and he was willing to listen to the commands of the generals. He would be a responsible soldier. The Netherworld launched several attacks, though they controlled the scale of the battle each time, only deploying a small number of Heavenly Body tier elites. The other members of the assault squads were all at the Sun Moon tier. Are they feeling us out? However, few people paid attention to this fact. Everyone was anxiously awaiting the arrival of the reinforcements. Right now, it was tremendously difficult for them to hold the Netherworld army at bay. Meanwhile, those who were smarter were also extremely confused. Why had the Netherworld army suddenly launched an all-out assault? One had to realize that Netherworld elites couldn't wield the regulations of the Immortal Realm after entering the Immortal Realm. So their battle prowess would fall by at least 3 or 4 stars. If both armies were of similar quality, such a drop in battle prowess would be like a death sentence. Moreover, the Immortal Realm didn't appear to be weaker than the Netherworld. So, what was the point of launching such a huge assault? Perhaps there are profound treasures hidden on our side, and even the great elites of the Netherworld have become interested. Thus, they've launched this offensive in the hopes of seizing this land. Even Eternal River tier elites have become interested. These treasures were definitely left by a great elite who was at least at the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. Perhaps this treasure is the inheritance of a saint. That must be the case. Such speculations were wildly popular, and they quickly spread throughout the entire army. Many people became giddy upon hearing this, and they started to consider whether or not they should search for this hidden treasure. If it were truly the inheritance of a saint, it was entirely possible that they could become a supreme elite in a single step. The war had yet to be fought, Yet many people had already started to think about other matters. The three commanding generals had no choice but to execute several people who were acting the most disobedient. This was necessary to ensure military discipline. Once the number of mercenaries increased, military discipline would naturally decrease. Mercenaries had no thought for the group, and it was very easy for them to reveal their own greed. After this slight hiccup, the Netherworld army launched several more assaults. However, the intensity of the battles was much lower than the noise that they generated. From beginning to end, all the battles were suppressed to a certain scale. With the passing of time, the reinforcements from the two imperial empires also started to arrive. More and more elites joined the Immortal Realm army, and it seemed as if the assault from the Netherworld was going to be stopped here and now. However, the arrival of these elites also reaffirmed people's belief that the Netherworld wasn't invading them to seize the land of Cloud Apex planet. Instead, they were invading them to obtain the inheritance of an eternal river tier or even saint. A soldier ran over to Ling Han and said, "Ling Han, the newly arrived captain wants to see you." None of the mercenaries had been incorporated into the legitimate armies, as they hadn't undergone any official training. Thus, it would be useless even if they were extremely powerful. There was simply no way they could merge into the military and cooperate smoothly. If they were forced into the three official armies, they would only end up making matters worse. As such, the mercenaries had been gathered together to form an independent army. If mutiny occurred, only this hastily put-together army would be affected. The battle prowess of the legitimate armies wouldn't be affected. Newly arrived captain? Ling Han found this a bit strange. Do I know this person? Why are they suddenly asking to see me? Whatever, I'll go if they want me to. He followed the soldier and arrived before a tent. The soldier stopped and respectfully said, "Captain Ling Han has arrived." This tent was huge, and it signified the lofty standing of its owner. "Let him enter," the person in the tent said. "Ha! This voice sounds a bit familiar," Ling Han said in his mind. Meanwhile, the soldier next to him had already opened the flap of the tent. A person immediately walked out. Xia Donglai. No wonder the voice sounded so familiar. No wonder they wanted to see me. So, it turns out that he wants to exact revenge. Ha 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 ha. Ling Han, you didn't expect this, did you? We meet again so soon. Xia Donglai sneered coldly, a mocking look on his face. He had initially planned to cultivate in seclusion and strive to become a heavenly body tier elite. When he succeeded, he would seek Ling Han and Faceless out and then kill them. He would make them pay a heavy price for humiliating him. However, the Netherworld had suddenly invaded, and even Great General Xie was deployed to the front lines. As a descendant of the Xie clan, he was also assigned to the position of captain. Coincidentally, Ling Han was under his direct command. He was naturally delighted by this fact, and the first thing he did upon realizing this was calling Ling Han over. He was going to flaunt his might as a superior. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Dumb C***NT, why is it you again? Have you not suffered enough yet?" Xie Donglai was infuriated upon hearing this. However, power was on his side and he said, "In this place, I'm the captain and you're my soldier. You have to do as I say." He stood there and waited for Ling Han to return. Once he returned with the firewood, he would continue to issue commands and force him to carry out other mundane tasks. If he dared to disobey, he would punish him according to military discipline. Haha, who told Ling Han to be his subordinate? However, the longer he waited, the darker his expression became. This was because Ling Han still hadn't returned. This brat actually dared to disobey my orders. He flared up in rage and immediately headed toward Ling Han's tent. "Ling Han," he roared. His voice rumbled like thunder, revealing the rage that he was currently experiencing. The surrounding soldiers were astonished by this roar, and many people walked over to check out the commotion. "Dumb C***NT, why is it you again?" Ling Han asked as he walked out of his tent. "You dared to disobey my command, so I'm here to punish you," Xie Donglai said coldly. Ling Han had given him a legitimate excuse to flaunt his power. Chapter 1287 Aggressive Approach. "Captain, dare I ask, what command did I disobey?" Ling Han asked with a smile.
He seemed extremely relaxed and unworried. Xie Donglai was lost for words. Before so many people, did he have the face to say that he had commanded Ling Han to collect firewood? If he said this, he would be making a fool of himself. Commanding a Sun Moon tier elite to collect firewood. What an utter joke. He could pick on Ling Han in private, but he wouldn't be able to do so in public. One didn't need to be a genius, and even those of average intelligence would be able to tell that he was purposefully picking on Ling Han. There were unspoken rules behind Xie Donglai's actions. He was the superior, and Ling Han was his subordinate. Thus, Ling Han would need to act exactly as he commanded. Otherwise, he would continue to pick on him until he submitted. However, once Ling Han yielded, he would only be pushed further and further, until there was no path of retreat. Thus, when dealing with petty superiors like Xie Donglai, one would only have two options: either submit completely or resist until the end. Ling Han naturally wouldn't submit. He had chosen to resist head-on. Xie Donglai's expression became dark. He was being challenged by a subordinate in public, and this made him feel extremely unhappy. Ling Han, you're disrespecting your superior, he shouted sharply. Oh, I'm disrespecting my superior by asking a simple question? How domineering of you.
Ling Han laughed and said, "The army of the Netherworld is only 50 kilometers away.
Captain, why don't you bring your domineering aura over there and scare them all away? Fuck. To say nothing of me, even Xie Qian won't be able to force the Netherworld army to retreat." Discomfort gripped at Xie Donglai's mind as he glowered at Ling Han. He enjoyed a higher cultivation level, a stronger battle prowess, and also a more influential background. In fact, he was even Ling Han's superior at this moment. So, why was he still unable to deal with him? With a menacing edge to his voice he said, "Since you're my subordinate, let me teach you some moves, lest you be killed once you enter the battlefield."
"Captain, how caring and considerate of you,"
Ling Han said mockingly. "Stop being a smart aleck. As a superior, it's my responsibility to guide my subordinates in cultivation." Xie Donglai felt like he had finally managed to grab onto a tangible point. Since he was more powerful, it was only natural that he should use his power to suppress Ling Han. "If you don't want to accept my guidance, fine. But you'll have to chop 10,000 pickles of firewood within a day." He was afraid that Ling Han would obey on the surface but resist in private again. Thus, he added a time limit to the task. Ling Han scoffed and said, "Why does young Master Xie need so much firewood? Do you want to hold a barbecue? If that's the case, you should have brought a few more servants from your home. This is the army, so why are you still acting like some mighty young master? What an absolute joke. Why, you little troublemaker, you actually dare to challenge your superior's might. Come, show me if you've got the right to challenge me." Xie Donglai immediately launched an attack at Ling Han. Wang! He extended a hand and flipped it over, and then pushed it down toward Ling Han. A formidable pressure instantly enveloped Ling Han, crashing down on him and trying to make him kneel. There was a difference of 2 minor levels between them, and thus the disparity between their power was genuinely huge. Ling Han remained proudly standing. Under the crushing pressure of Xie Donglai's power, streaks of divine patterns started to appear on his now glowing body. If one looked carefully, they would see that these divine patterns were actually 9 divine dragons, each with a unique appearance. 9 dragons' tyrant body art. As the legend said, the 9 sons of the dragon were all different. Right now, these 9 divine dragons still had yet to become true dragons. Some were missing horns, while others were missing claws. However, these divine dragons would gradually become more perfect following Ling Han's improvement in the body art. When these 9 divine dragons became true dragons, it would signify that Ling Han had reached the pinnacle level of the 9 dragons' tyrant body art and advanced to the level of a saint. What? It's actually 9 different true dragons? Cultivation techniques that have to do with true dragons are all incredibly powerful. No wonder he dares to challenge Xie Donglai. He's legitimately got some skill. However, the difference between their cultivation levels is too great. He's destined to be suppressed. Say, this Xie Donglai person is so petty. He's still trying to avenge his private resentments at this kind of time. The onlookers chattered among themselves,
some of them expressing their sympathy toward Ling Han and others showing their disdain toward Xie Donglai's pettiness. However, not a single one of them stepped forward to stop the conflict. They were all mercenaries, and none of them had any strong friendship with each other. So, why would they risk offending Xie Donglai to help Ling Han? Instead of helping, many were instead excited to see how this conflict would pan out. The 9 dragons unleashed their might, inhaling and exhaling clouds and mists as they did. Ling Han stood as tall and as proud as a mountain. The 9 dragons' tyrant body art wasn't the only thing that he practiced, with his godly bones also nearly as tough as level 8 godly metal. Right now, someone at the consummate level wanted to suppress him? How laughable. Xie Donglai, how much longer do you want to flip your hands? What on earth are you playing at? Perhaps you really do want to hold a barbecue? Ling Han said with a chuckle. Fucking brat. Xie Donglai whispered under his breath. He, an elite at the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier, was actually unable to contain a measly cultivator at the medium extreme. Moreover, this was in front of so many onlookers. How much face would he lose? He knew that Ling Han was peculiar, him being able to kill Zhu Liyun and all. However, he had been helped by Faceless at that time, and he had also relied on the might of the Misty Soul capturing flower. Thus, Xie Donglai thought very little of Ling Han's actual battle prowess. Moreover, he was a 4-star genius himself, so it wouldn't matter little even if Ling Han were also a 4-star genius. This would cancel out, and he would still enjoy a crushing advantage of 2 minor levels. Thus, he had thought that he would be able to suppress Ling Han with a mere flip of his hands. Not only would that have been a slap to Ling Han's face and a good way to exact his revenge, but it would have also been a good way to send a warning to the other mercenaries. It would make them think twice about disobeying him, their superior. To his surprise, Ling Han was actually a difficult opponent to suppress. Right now, it was he who was between a rock and a hard place. Boos rang out in the surroundings. Shut up! Xie Donglai roared. He charged toward Ling Han, his hands transforming into claws that swiped at him. Boom! He had clearly activated a secret technique, with his hands transforming into pitch-black demonic claws that were as large as a house. These claws had a cold sheen to them, and it was as if they were made of metal. Gasp! Could this be the black gold demonic eagle claw? According to legends, black gold demonic eagles are terrifying beasts that can tear through godly metal that corresponds to their level with a single swipe of their claws. If this strike lands, that person is done for. With so many people present, there were naturally some who could identify this attack. These people immediately identified the secret technique that Xie Donglai had unleashed. Boom! The 2 claws smashed down, and it was as if even space was about to shatter apart. Patches of uncanny black swirls appeared in the surroundings. Ling Han didn't plan to face this attack head-on, so he immediately jumped to the side and dashed into the crowd of onlookers. Xie Donglai wielded his demonic claws as he chased after Ling Han. Pang! There was a resounding boom, and several people were instantly sent flying. They spat blood as they collapsed to the ground, and many of them started to curse in fury. Chaos descended upon the crowd. There's no animosity between you and the others, yet you actually attacked them with such viciousness. Xie Donglai, might you be a spy of the netherworld? Ling Han was completely unscathed. There were so many people to ease the pressure off him, so he could easily deal with the shock waves of Xie Donglai's attacks. Xie Donglai was about to explode in anger. Fuck, you actually dare to slander me? However, he was too angry to speak, so he continued to wield his demonic claws as he chased after Ling Han. A netherworld spy is killing people. Ling Han shouted at the top of his lungs as he ran toward the crowds of people. Pang pang pang. The crowds of people were unable to dodge in time, and many were sent flying by Xie Donglai's wanton attacks. Right now, everyone could clearly see that Xie Donglai was attacking the Immortal Realm encampment like a crazed maniac. Chapter 1288 War breaks out. A chance has come. This was the camp for mercenaries, and there was a heavenly body tier elite on standby here. He was the chief commander, and subordinate to him were 12 captains, who took charge of the whole mercenaries' camp respectively. This also meant that Xie Donglai was only one of the 12 captains, and could not possibly do as he liked. He was demented and attacked his subordinates in the camp. This was something that everyone could see, and there were as many as a few hundred victims. The effect of this was naturally extremely negative, so soon enough, an elite appeared and stopped Xie Donglai. Consecutively, that heavenly body tier chief commander called Xie Donglai over, and reprimanded him severely before shooing Xie Donglai off, and commanding him to make amends for his crime through meritorious service. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. It was really easy to do things when you had someone in the higher echelons backing you up. He had wounded so many people, yet had only received a scolding for it. If it had been anyone else, putting everything else aside, his position as team captain would definitely have been revoked. As the descendant of an Eternal River tier elite, Xie Donglai had special privileges everywhere, so it was no wonder that he was so arrogant. He had obviously seen Ling Han duck into the masses, yet still attacked without reservations. He was completely certain that he would get off with a smack on the hand. However, though Xie Donglai had become the most unwelcomed, the most hated captain, Ling Han was not any better off. Though it was Xie Donglai who had inflicted injuries, Ling Han was the one who had drawn the disaster to them, so he was similarly detested. Ling Han was indifferent to it though. He had not come here to make any friends. Once this battle was over, they were naturally going to go their separate ways. Furthermore, after this matter, Xie Donglai did not come and make trouble with Ling Han again. This was very abnormal. Yet Ling Han was guessing that Xie Donglai was preparing an even crueler vengeance. The mindset of this kind of person was very easy to guess. It could be none other than using the netherworld beings to get rid of him. Just nice. I planned the same, Ling Han thought. He, too, did not want to be targeted secretly by a stupid bird all the time. He had to resolve the matter as soon as possible. If he wanted to use the netherworld armies to kill someone, there were two ways. Firstly, draw the person into the proximity of an elite of the netherworld, such as heavenly body tier. Then, a sliver of the shockwave created from one of their attacks would be enough to crush a sun-moon tier completely. Yet Ling Han was not an idiot. Would he still continue on that path if he saw a heavenly body tier elite ahead? This would require Xie Donglai to compel him, but Xie Donglai would also be placed in a dangerous situation because of this. He hated Ling Han, but it was absolutely impossible that he wanted to die with Ling Han. Then, it could only be the second method, and that was to draw Ling Han into the depths of the army camp of the netherworld and use innumerable sun-moon tiers to gang up on Ling Han and wear him down to death. Although this would also cause Xie Donglai to be under siege as well, his cultivation level was higher, so he would definitely last longer than Ling Han. Furthermore, he still had trump cards to escape. Once he saw Ling Han was dead, he would be able to break out of the siege. Since he was already dead, who could say that Xie Donglai had sent Ling Han into the depths of the enemy troops? Didn't they see that even he had rushed inside? This was called taking the lead, and should be rewarded. There is 80% that is what he's planning. Ling Han had a very accurate grasp of Xie Donglai's mindset. This kind of profligate young master was very easy to guess. Then let's just see who would be falling into whose trap. A few peaceful days passed, and the netherworld finally started a large-scale battle. This time, all the major troops of the immortal realm all joined together to fight against their strong foes. The mercenaries' camp that Ling Han was at was naturally pulled in as well. To be honest, in comparison to the regular armies, they felt like they were about to become cannon fodder. Regular armies all practiced combat in formations that allowed them to attack together. 10 people would make one small team, and 100 would be a large team, which could exhibit 50% or even 60% of their overall power. This was very frightening as this meant that about 20 people would be able to boost their battle prowess by 1 star. Yet the mercenaries would be fighting on their own, and no matter how strong a lone soldier was, they could possibly be overwhelmed by their enemy's advantage in numbers. Ling Han surveyed the scene from higher up, and saw dust everywhere ahead of them. A great number of netherworld elites was charging over, and they were also similarly a mixture of various groups. There were regular military and mercenary teams as well. He could see this clearly. Regular armies moved in neat formations, maintaining their positions even when they were charging an attack, but the mercenaries were different. At one moment, they would be charging ahead, and at another, they would be hanging back. Sometimes, they would head left, and at other times, they would be heading right. They were completely moving at their own pace. Some people were even giants 30,000 meters tall. Their gigantic footsteps descended down, and directly stomped over. This was definitely not Sun Moon tier. Sun Moon tiers could not possibly form such an astonishing figure. Heavenly Body tier elite. Hence, the stomp of this foot was extremely frightening. Even the heaven and earth had darkened. The foot had not even descended, and the ground had already cracked. All the people below looked overwhelmed with horror. They were really going to die without having done anything worthwhile. Humph. However, the immortal realm naturally had elites as well. A person moved, stabbing out with his sword. A grand light slashed over. That giant foot was instantly severed. The severed limb still descended, but no longer had the might of a stomp. Ho ho, you actually managed to disperse the might of an attack from my figure, so you are not that weak after all. Come battle with me. An elite of the netherworld leaped up into the skies, issuing a challenge to the immortal realm. As you wish. An elite of the immortal realm flew up into the skies astride sword light and began to battle that elite from the netherworld. Instantly, a figure 30 km tall once again appeared, and several sword lights with the same length similarly slashed through the air, its might not the slightest bit weakened. Charge! Even more elites charged over. Charge! Ling Han and the others shouted out as well. Influenced by the boiling blood and fighting spirit in the battlefield, they did not bother about life or death now, either. They only wanted to have a vigorous battle as well. Dong dong dong. The war drums rang out loudly, cheering on the soldiers of both sides. They had some kind of rhythm, and had the effect of stimulating fighting spirit. Everyone did not care for themselves. In this kind of battle, no one could possibly have a way out, because there was completely no way of retreat. The people behind them were continuously charging ahead. Moreover, there were also a few elites sitting on the gigantic war elephant observing the battle coldly. If there appeared any deserters, ho-ho, they would move at the first instant to get rid of them. In a battle between two armies, morale was the most important. Charge! Xie Donglai called out loudly. He took the lead, and led his army into the ranks of the netherworld, and went further and further in. At this time, everyone had been blinded by the slaughter and bloodshed. They only knew that either they had to kill or they would be killed, and when they felt the pressure increase further and further, only then did they shockingly realize that they had already penetrated into the depths of the netherworld army, and only less than 3,000 of their initial 10,000 comrades remained. They had already charged to this place, so how could their pressure not be heavy? How could the price they paid for their charge not be heavy? How did we charge over to this place? Quick retreat! The remaining 3,000 called out. This was not dauntlessly killing their enemies. This was completely going to their deaths. Ling Han was also driven into a slight frenzy by the battle, and had completely not foreseen that Xie Donglai would actually be so demented. He brought his whole army into their graves just to kill him. Charge back! Everyone came to realization, and no longer blindly charged forwards under Xie Donglai's lead. Instead, they turned around to counterattack. How strong was the power with all these people added together? Even Xie Donglai could not possibly stop them. However, their lone unit had entered deeply into the Netherworld army's files, so how difficult was it to charge back out? Ah! Terrible cries rang out unendingly, and the remaining 3,000 people were being worn away at an astonishing pace. Furthermore, they were also a troop of mercenaries, so in a time of danger, they naturally would only care for themselves, completely lacking a teamwork mindset. The troops were divided, and death and injury came even faster. Xie Donglai showed a cruel grin. As he was sacrificing a whole troop of 10,000 to be buried with Ling Han, this brat could be considered to have died a worthy death. Not clear whether it means 150 to 160%, or if the author implies that they'd get in each other's way otherwise, so it'd be difficult to show even half the power per every person otherwise. Chapter 1289 Demented. Xie Donglai's eyes were focused on Ling Han. He wanted to witness with his own eyes Ling Han's death, and only then would he escape. They were both in the Sun Moon tier, and he was definitely capable of lasting longer than Ling Han. Furthermore, he had deliberately not used his full power, because he did not want to be ganged up on by too many people from the netherworld. That way, he could calmly watch Ling Han head to his death.
Ling Han naturally discovered Xie Donglai's gaze. It was so filled with resentment and hatred, like a blade aimed directly at his back, so how could he possibly not feel it? He shook his head internally. This man's desire to get revenge on him had really reached the extreme. He would actually sacrifice a whole team of 10,000 soldiers to kill him. But upon further thought, this team of 10,000 soldiers did not belong to his Xie clan. Even if they all died, so what? Damn it! A cold sharpness flickered in Ling Han's eyes. He suddenly turned around and charged towards Xie Donglai, loudly calling out, "Brother Xie, let us kill the enemy together." He drew out the divine demon sword, and a murderous aura suddenly shot skywards, like the arrival of the emperor himself. The surrounding netherworld elites were all sent flying. There were some who lost their heads, or had severed arms and legs. As long as their battle prowess had not reached the consummate level of Sun Moon tier, they would definitely be incapable of escaping this calamity. Ling Han forcefully charged to right in front of Xie Donglai. His eyes narrowed, and a spiritual barrage suddenly shot out. 7 kill subduing soul technique. Woo! Xie Donglai's movements instantly paused. Being on the receiving end of this kind of attack to his spirit, he couldn't help but be affected. However, as the descendant of the great General Xie, who himself was a top-grade genius, how could he possibly not have learned a technique to train his spirit? His spirit was extremely strong. Thus, he merely paused under the 7 kill subduing soul technique, and immediately went back to normal. But it should be known that they were in the midst of a chaotic battle, and swords and sabers were attacking everywhere. It was only that one instant, and Xie Donglai had received a few strikes. Thankfully, his defensive origin power had not dispersed, so he was not too heavily wounded. "Damn it!" he uttered angrily. At first, it should be him leading Ling Han into a trap, so why had the tables turned on him and it was he who had fallen into Ling Han's trap? If it were not for the fact that he was strong enough, and his spirit had been cultivated to a sturdy level, he would not have just been wounded with that momentary pause just now. Die! He could no longer suppress the killing intent in his heart, turning his weapon on Ling Han. A golden saber revealed itself, a black aura washing out. It was filled with corrosive ability, making it seem like even the air itself was about to melt. The netherworld beings around them all watched in confusion. Why had internecine strife broken out on the other side? However, they did not mind. They just had to kill them both. Pang 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 pang. Ling Han and Xie Donglai were deeply embroiled in a heavy siege. Not only did they have to stay on guard against each other, they also had to deal with the attacks from the netherworld. And this was not just 1 or 2 strikes. As less and less people from this lone unit of theirs were left alive, the pressure they endured became heavier and heavier. In theory, Ling Han should have died long ago. He was merely in the medium extreme of the Sun Moon tier, so it was definitely impossible that he could last longer than someone in the peak stage of the consummate level. However, in truth, Ling Han was still very energetic, looking like he was definitely not retreating before he killed Xie Donglai. This was unimaginable to Xie Donglai. Why did this guy still not die? The one who will be dying is you. Ling Han replied coldly. For the sake of a personal grudge, you actually sacrificed a whole unit. Being so demented, what right do you still have to call yourself human? Hey, with a whole army accompanying you to death, are you still unwilling to rest in peace obediently? Xie Donglai brandished his saber in a swift slash. Golden light danced, his attacks very pronounced, but the black corrosive chi was filled with darkness, forming a powerful contrast. You really can't be saved. Ling Han did not speak any further. This mind of Xie Donglai was rotten down to the core, and he was completely irredeemable, and there was no meaning in saving him. Kill. He used the divine demon sword, and the lightning sword technique was in play. The surrounding netherworld elites were all sent flying as they were completely no match for it. If the elites of the heavenly body tier did not move, then even the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier would have to be wary of Ling Han, who was wielding the divine demon sword. Of course, if one could still surpass 3 to 4 stars of battle prowess on the basis of consummate level, they were still capable of bulldozing Ling Han. For example, Xie Donglai. As he brandished his saber in attack, Ling Han did not dare take his attacks head-on, but rather used the star-plucking step to dodge and evade. In any case, there were many soldiers of the netherworld here, so he would just use them as shields.
The two of them battled for a long time in the Netherworld's ranks, and this gradually attracted the attention of Netherworld elites. As a streak of divine sense swept over them, both Ling Han and Xie Donglai felt a full-body coldness. Merely 2 sun-moon tears, and you actually dare charge here. A large hand descended from the skies, slapping down on Ling Han and Xie Donglai, who were still engaged in battle. There were various heavenly bodies floating above that large hand, and it was as if the whole heavens were pressing down on them. A heavenly body tier elite. Xie Donglai's expression shifted drastically. He no longer cared about seeing Ling Han die with his own eyes. At this time, his own survival was more important. He hurriedly drew out a divine seal and slapped it on himself. Suddenly, golden light spread out, wrapping around him tightly. When he'd returned to the Xie clan, he asked for another life-saving seal. Xiao. He immediately turned into a streak of golden light that shot to the heavens. You still think of fleeing? Ling Han had foreseen this. With his own body as a bow, the ultimate arrow was activated. Xiao, an arrow shot out, chasing quickly towards Xie Donglai. The methods of Eternal River Tier were too astonishing. Even if it was just a carelessly made divine seal, it had powerful might. If it was only the annihilating dragon star arrow, it definitely would not be able to catch up to him. Thus, Ling Han directly used the ultimate arrow, spilling out all the power in his body in that single instant. Pooh! The arrow was extraordinarily fast. A streak of blood splattered, and Xie Donglai released a terrible cry. Then, he actually dropped down from the skies. It was unimaginable. Someone in the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, who furthermore was a 4-star genius, had actually been wounded by an arrow shot by someone in the medium extreme. Still, who asked Xie Donglai to only think of running for his life in his rush, thinking that he was completely safe once he used the divine seal. He was naturally going to relax. How could he have imagined that there would be such a divine arrow chasing after him? However, it was also precisely because Xie Donglai was strong enough, and the divine seal had borne him away fast enough, that this arrow only wounded him, and not tore him into pieces directly. Interesting. That large hand fished over, and caught hold of Xie Donglai. Then, it turned back around, and grabbed out at Ling Han. Presently, Ling Han had lost all strength, and was even incapable of maintaining his adult state. With a PU, he turned into an infant. How could he dare face this head-on? With a flash, he entered into the Black Tower. Without recovering his power, it was useless even if he came back out. The large hand caught nothing, and a figure rapidly appeared subsequently. It was a gray-robed man. His figure and appearance was all very normal, but his beard was actually made out of multiple strands of meat, which were still squirming around. The mere sight would make anyone shiver. Xie Donglai was currently being held up in his hand. However, he had lost consciousness, all 4 limbs drooping and blood dripping endlessly. If he had known that this would be the result, he would not have penetrated deeply into the army ranks with a single unit even if it killed him. He had dragged himself into danger as well. Where is he? The elite with a beard of meat surveyed the scene, and looked surprised. This Ling Han actually disappeared without a trace. A minor character merely in the Sun-Moon tier had actually managed to disappear without a trace completely without his knowledge. Interesting, he repeated, his divine sense expanding. He was determined to find Ling Han. This kind of reminds me of Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. Chapter 1290 An Inconceivable Guess. Ling Han felt that he had done his best. There were hundreds of Netherworld elites that had died in his hands, and his power was completely lost now, so it was also impossible for him to kill his enemy now. More importantly, he was definitely being targeted by that meat-bearded elite by now, and added with the white-robed elite that he had encountered even earlier, 2 great elites of heavenly body tier both wanted to capture him, so it was best for him not to appear for the time being. The Purple Moon Divine Maiden had previously promised that she would take care of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden on his behalf. This kind of elite would definitely keep her word. So Ling Han did not worry that the chaotic battles would put the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden in danger. After all, the fierce woman was also a top-grade elite. Outside of the Heavenly Body tier, there was absolutely no one who could subdue her. Ling Han began to recover his power. With a pile of true origin stones beside him, and inside the Black Tower, he could go crazy. Wang, all the pores of his body fully opened, continuing to absorb the power within the true origin stone, and his dried-up dantian immediately became abundant. Only after an hour, his origin power had completely replenished. His stamina recovery, meanwhile, was passive. Its rate was very fast, and had already recovered to the peak state before his origin power had. He watched from inside the Black Tower, and saw that the meat-bearded elite had not walked too far. The latter stood proudly above him, his divine sense stretching out far and wide. Obviously, he was still searching for Ling Han's whereabouts. Fuck, he was like an unshakable shadow. Ling Han then simply began to concoct alchemical pills. Being idle, he might as well do some alchemy. He shouldn't waste any time. A day later, he had finished concocting a cauldron's worth of level 4 alchemical pills, and then surveyed the situation. He could see the battle had ended, and both sides had retreated, leaving behind innumerable dead bodies. Blood had dyed the ground red. These were all immortal bodies and immortal blood, and if it was not because the regulations in this place were too strange, a godly medicine could definitely be nurtured with them. He exited the Black Tower, and rushed back to the army camp. This battle brought grave damage to the immortal realm. 3 great armies added with the mercenaries had initially totaled up to around 700,000 people. Afterwards, there was also a great amount of reinforcements, so the total number of soldiers had reached about 1,300,000. However, their overall strength was only equal to the Netherworld armies because any one soldier from the Netherworld would be in the Sun-Moon tier at least. And after this battle, the numbers of the immortal realm dropped to around 800,000 in one go. The majority of those that died in battle were in the Mountain River tier, and there was no small number of Sun-Moon tiers either. There were even 3 heavenly body tiers who died. This shook the whole Cloud Apex planet, and someone even suggested to ask for help from other planets outside the galaxy. This suggestion was immediately rejected. Firstly, a trip across the galaxy would at least be a matter of 1 to 2 months, and that would consume too much time. Secondly, it would be easy to invite outside help, but it would be difficult to send them away. Territory was something that was prized by every force. If they occupied a piece of land, they would be able to draw on the power of the nation, and the overall strength of the whole army would be increased greatly. Hence, outside of desperate situations, both the great imperial empires were unwilling to have a third imperial empire step onto Cloud Apex planet, and the situation at present was far from irresolvable, so the 2 great imperial empires were completely capable of holding down the fort. News was brought back that the Netherworld army kept searching for something in the 2-realm battlefield. This caused them to be even more certain that the Netherworld had not come to conquer the Cloud Apex planet, but rather for the treasure in this place. Another piece of news was that Xie Donglai actually didn't die. Instead, he became a hostage, and the Xie clan was forced to sacrifice a large number of true origin stones as ransom for him. Ling Han was shocked. This guy was really too lucky, wasn't he? He didn't die even with that. Just think about it. At the time, Xie Donglai had used a divine seal to escape, and then had been shot out of the sky before being captured by an elite from the Netherworld. Most probably, that Netherworld elite had also witnessed Xie Donglai using the divine seal, and thus thought that the latter must have a powerful background, which was why he thought of capturing Xie Donglai and treated him like goods to be traded. By now, Ling Han had become one of the rare few survivors of the unit that he had been in the end. There were still more than 10 people who'd managed to escape the heavy siege, and every one of them cursed Xie Donglai to death. If it were not because this guy went his own way, how could they possibly have been put in a hazardous situation and almost completely wiped out? However, the people of the Xie clan were obviously very skilled in public relations. Immediately, a completely opposite public opinion appeared, claiming that Xie Donglai was a brave man, doing something that others could not. He was fully focused on killing the enemy, and even brought up the rear to obtain a chance of survival for others. He did not hesitate to fight to the end, himself being trapped in the enemy ranks. They could actually describe the act of being captured and used as a hostage in such a self-righteous and bold manner. Only such a powerful force like the Xie clan could be so shameless and unembarrassed, but now the Xie clan had spoken out, who would dare have a different opinion? Xie Donglai thus became a hero, and a hero naturally could not be sacrificed easily. The Xie clan expressed their agreement to the conditions from the Netherworld, and took out a large number of true origin stones to pay as ransom for Xie Donglai. However, it was one matter for the Xie clan to portray Xie Donglai as a hero. The opinion inside the clan was a different matter. This time, he caused them to sacrifice so much, so how could the Xie clan not punish him? Xie Donglai was summoned back to the clan at the first instant. As for how he would be dealt with, it was not something that would be known by outsiders. Ling Han was rueful. Xie Donglai didn't die even with that? Could it be that this guy was born in the year of the cockroach or something like that? But what he did not know was that Xie Donglai's hatred towards him became even deeper. At first, it should have been a surefire plan, yet it was ruined by Ling Han, and his status in the Xie clan suffered a devastating decline because of this. From now onwards, it might be that he would become nothing other than an idle member of the clan. The two armies were in a confrontation. Major battles would occasionally break out, and when time had passed until 2 months later, the Netherworld suddenly had a clear target. They began to launch attacks madly at the Purple Moon Army. Though the three great armies joined forces in battle, it was obviously impossible that they would be completely mixed up. Thus, the Netherworld had an extremely clear target, the Purple Moon Army. To prove this fact, the three great armies even deliberately scattered wider, and the result was even more obvious. Could it be that these bastards from the Netherworld wanted the women from the immortal realm, and a large number at that? All of a sudden, there were various wild guesses flying around. There was a very popular theory, and that was that the Netherworld wanted these women to give birth to descendants that possessed the bloodline of both the Netherworld and the immortal realm. These people would possess the ability to adapt to the regulations of the two realms. Years later, when these people fought their way back, they would be able to easily invade into the immortal realm and deliver a fatal blow to the immortal realm. This theory was quite frightening. At first, it seemed very logical, but upon further thinking, there were multiple holes in this theory. Putting aside how many young men had to be prepared for this venture, when these women entered into the Netherworld, they would be slowly assimilated, which meant that the first batch of children born would have the ability to accommodate both the regulations of the two realms, and they would have to keep staying in the two-realm battlefield. Otherwise, they would definitely be assimilated by the regulations of the Netherworld. With just that one batch of people, how many geniuses could actually be produced? If they were not prodigies, then how much damage could they actually create if they snuck into the immortal realm? Furthermore, would the Netherworld really be able to trust these newborn babies, and sacrifice all their resources to nurture them? At least, Ling Han was definitely not going to believe it. He suddenly thought of a possibility. There was a small beast in the Purple Moon Army. Coincidentally, that small beast came from the Netherworld. Was it so coincidental that the Netherworld armies were targeting the Purple Moon Army? What if it was for the sake of that little beast? Though it was inconceivable as that little beast only knew how to act cute, how could there be such a coincidence in this world? This little beast had only appeared not that long ago, yet the Netherworld armies had mobilized a grand invasion, and they were directly targeting the Purple Moon Army. Eliminating all the impossible, no matter how inconceivable the result was, whatever left was the truth. Chapter 1291 Crossing the Border. That little beast was no ordinary beast. It could actually cause the Netherworld to launch such a large-scale battle, causing innumerable loss of life. Why did they not directly say it, just directly demanding the immortal realm to hand over the little beast? It was very simple. Once the immortal realm realized the extraordinary nature of the little beast, they would definitely capitalize on it, and by that time, the price the Netherworld would have to pay would not only be the deaths of so many people, but could possibly be much, much more than that. Ling Han couldn't help but be stunned. Exactly how important was this little beast that it would cause the Netherworld to spare no expense in their venture to take it back? Though all this was merely his deduction, he had a very strong feeling that this was the truth behind the invasion of the Netherworld. Other theories, whether it was about treasure or kidnapping women, were completely undependable. However, who would believe such a crazy theory? That was merely a little beast in the mountain river tier. Could it really incite such a large war? That was really the biggest joke ever heard. Ling Han wanted to inform the Purple Moon Divine Maiden, but when he thought further about it, it was even more inappropriate. In his opinion, it was best to return the little beast to the Netherworld, and then the Netherworld would naturally command the retreat of their army. Even if he had guessed wrongly, they would not lack a harmless little beast. But what if the Purple Moon Divine Maiden believed his theory, but wanted to use the little beast as a threat against the netherworld. That could possibly cause the war to increase in scale. This kind of deduction originated from the fact that the netherworld had not revealed what they were looking for all this while. That was precisely because they did not want the little beast to become their weakness, or even cause some even more extreme people to kill the little beast. If the little beast was used to threaten them, it could possibly have the opposite effect, and the netherworld would erupt and go berserk. Ling Han decided to move privately. He would find the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and the two of them would bring the little beast back to the netherworld to end this battle. Otherwise, it would only cause more bloodshed and death. Because their army had serious casualties and injuries, there was temporarily no mission for them, and they were not recruited into other mercenary units, either. They were given a considerable amount of freedom. Thus, Ling Han easily left the camp, and came to camp of the Purple Moon Army. Yet he could no longer enter into the Purple Moon Army camp. The military discipline here was strict, and even if Ling Han had the token given to him by the Purple Moon Divine Maiden, it was useless because it was presently a time of war. Thankfully, Ling Han had also familiarized himself around the Purple Moon Army camp, and coincidentally met the group of girls he had met previously. He asked them to inform the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and after a while, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden appeared. She was carrying the little beast, but what surprised Ling Han was that not even the slightest bit of an evil aura emerged from the little beast any longer. It was as if it was a locally born and bred demonic beast. If Ling Han had not witnessed it with his own eyes, he would definitely not doubt that this little guy came from the netherworld. This further strengthened Ling Han's deduction. This little beast was not ordinary. What happened? The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden asked. Ling Han nodded, and transmitted a message through divine sense, informing her of his analysis and deduction. At first, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was stunned, and felt that this was practically a total nonsense. However, she did not immediately accuse Ling Han of letting his imagination run wild. Instead she asked, "Are you sure?" "I am at least 80% sure." Ling Han nodded. "Let's go." The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden obviously trusted Ling Han very much. Though Ling Han was not completely sure, she chose to believe Ling Han. The two of them left the camp, and headed into the depths of the two-realm battlefield. They circled around the blockade line of the netherworld. After all, this place was too large, so the netherworld could not possibly completely seal off this place. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden could leave the camp for a limited time, but it could not be too long, or she would be treated as a deserter, and if the army that Ling Han was in was not like an empty shell, he would also be under severe restrictions. "You go back first. I will send this guy to the netherworld," Ling Han said. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was filled with worry. In the eyes of beings from the immortal level, the netherworld was the very most dangerous place, with man-eating demons all around. Furthermore, though Ling Han had outstanding talent, he was still in the medium extreme of Sun-Moon tier, after all. Now the netherworld was launching a great invasion, and there were innumerable elites. How dangerous would this trip to the netherworld be? "Don't worry. Have you forgotten that I still have the Black Tower?" Ling Han asked, smiling. Since he knew that there was a celestial realm, and the Black Tower was a celestial tool, if it really showed its might, even a saint could be killed. But if he did that, the celestial realm would definitely be alerted, and there would be true supreme elites coming to seek the Black Tower. By that time, even if Ling Han hid in the Black Tower, he could still possibly suffer a calamity. Hence, if he could avoid using the Black Tower, it was best not to. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden thought for a long time, but still handed the little beast over to Ling Han, causing the little beast to yowl loudly in anxiety. Who knew if it couldn't bear leaving the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, or if it was afraid that Ling Han would kill it and make a soup out of it. Ling Han could not allow this little beast to act spoiled. He picked it up, and his figure rapidly sped off. Now, the people from both realms were in a confrontation at the front lines, and there were not many people here. Ling Han entered deeply into the central area of the two-realm battlefield. This had become a zone of chaos, the space incredibly chaotic. Because this was the connection zone of the two worlds, directions would lose meaning in this place. Ling Han determinedly walked on. In this place, a very serious collision happened between the regulations from the two realms, and they evaporated into nothing. Thus, it was impossible to draw on the regulations of the heaven and earth here, and power was the only key factor of battle prowess. But as he walked forwards, the regulations reappeared, and a completely different space appeared in front of Ling Han. In truth, this was also a galaxy, but Ling Han had a feeling that it was incompatible with the galaxy of the immortal realm.
This was a change of regulations.
A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind, and the aura of the demon master rose up, shrouding his whole body. By now, whoever saw him would think he was from the netherworld. That aura was completely different from the aura of a being of the immortal realm. The little beast also changed, releasing an aura unique to the netherworld. Indeed, it was like a chameleon, and possessed the ability to adapt to its environment.
Ling Han was stunned. What kind of breed was it exactly? How could it be so strange?
Jiao! Jiao! The little beast bore its fangs and brandished its claws at Ling Han as if angered by the fact that he told the heavenly phoenix divine maiden to separate from it.
Hey, that's my wife, so the one who should be jealous is me. Ling Han said with a grin.
Xiao! A human figure suddenly appeared out of thin air. Ling Han had not sensed how he had appeared at all. It seemed as if he had been here all this while, and it was Ling Han who had not discovered his presence. He was a sturdy man as tall as 9 meters. His full body of muscles protruding boldly like mountains, exuding a frightening feeling of strength.
He merely moved lightly, and the air itself exploded. Very good, very good. Little Master has finally been found. This man laughed loudly, looking gratified.
He stretched out his arm in a grabbing motion, and the little beast fell into his palm. He nodded at Ling Han and said, "Brat, you have done a great merit. I have to immediately bring Little Master back, and have no time to reward you. Well, hold on to this token, and come to the chaotic demon palace to receive your reward." He tossed a silver plaque to Ling Han, and then disappeared into the distance with a large stride in an instant.
Only then did Ling Han get his breath back. Suppressed by the other's genuine aura, he practically couldn't even breathe. The eternal river tear. True enough, the netherworld's target was the little beast. Furthermore, even an eternal river tear elite had to address him as Little Master. Did that mean that it was his master? No wonder they wanted to start war. The little beast's identity was too important. Chapter 1292. The Netherworld Army retreats. The Netherworld Army retreated. Just like how this war had started in a baffling manner, it ended in an incredibly abrupt way. But now that the conflict had concluded, it was natural that everyone would be cheering with joy. Who would care why the war had started in the first place? When Ling Han returned, he saw teams of Netherworld soldiers turn back. Because he was enshrouded in the aura of a demon master, he was treated like one of their own by the people of the Netherworld. Absolutely no one had the slightest bit of suspicion about him. He did not avoid them, and just boldly and directly journeyed ahead. In any case, the war had ended, and everything had gone back to its original course. Those that should be training here would still be training here, and those who were looking for realm spirit stones here would continue looking. The majority of Netherworld soldiers probably did not even know why this war had started. Otherwise, it would be inevitable that too many people in the know would eventually leak the secret. Those who truly knew the reason were limited to the higher-ups of the Netherworld who had started this war. No matter what, they would have to be heavenly body tier or stronger. Ling Han thought back to when the Netherworld had just began their invasion. That white-robed elite had once said that he wanted to ask him a question, and no matter what the answer was, the former would still kill him. Now that he thought about it, it should have been about whether he had seen the little beast. If he had been questioned clearly at the time, perhaps the following war would not have started, and so many people would not have died. Ling Han shook his head. Too many people had fought a muddle-headed war. He returned to base camp, and could see everyone waving their arms and cheering, especially those at the lower ranks. All of them were incredibly excited. War was merciless. In a war, it was naturally those weaker who would have much higher chances of dying. They were people who lived with their lives on the line all the time. Some had even written their wills, and if they died in battle, they would have someone bring their will back to their hometown. Now that the war had suddenly ended, everyone felt lucky that they had survived by the skin of their teeth. However, the armies were not called back, because it could not be confirmed whether the Netherworld was merely putting on an act,
Maybe the netherworld would suddenly turn back and catch them off guard when they relaxed. Yet Ling Han knew that the netherworld could not possibly charge back here. They would only be like how they used to be. Everyone would be confronting each other in the two-realm battlefield. I would guard against you charging here, and you would stay on guard against me charging over. All this was actually because of a little beast. Even if Ling Han revealed the truth now, there probably wouldn't even be a single person who would believe him aside from the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Precisely because the netherworld army had retreated in such an inexplicable manner, everyone was saying that the netherworld had obtained the treasure trove that they had been searching for. After they had opened it, they had brought it back to be studied in the netherworld. This theory was very popular, and some extremists even talked about launching a counterattack on the netherworld to snatch back the treasure. There were very many greedy people, but only a very few supporters. Charging into the netherworld would mean having to fight under the regulations of the heaven and earth of the netherworld. The deeper they went, the more their battle prowess would be decreased. That would be too dangerous. It should be known that the netherworld also had Genesis and Eternal River tiers. There were similarly many elites in the netherworld. Furthermore, resisting invasion from the netherworld was everyone's joint duty and responsibility. It could not be shucked off. However, if it was a matter of launching a counterattack on the netherworld, then it could not possibly be a matter of compulsion. Only those who had reached the strongest level of the Cloud Apex planet would be arrogant enough to invade the netherworld. Thus, declaration of a counterattack was mere empty words. The majority thought that the overall level of cultivation of the Cloud Apex planet was still insufficient to overwhelm the netherworld, and if they launched a counterattack, it would only weaken their forces. Another 10 days later, the Purple Moon Army, the Wind Riders Army, and the Holy Army all returned to their base camps, and the mercenary units were disbanded. The troops that had come as reinforcements also returned, and this great war between the two realms finally ended officially. Even after innumerable years, countless people of the immortal realm were still confused. At that time, why had the netherworld started this war? It had caused both sides to suffer heavy casualties for no reason. Only a very few people knew that this was probably because of a little beast's mischief and playfulness, causing it to accidentally barge into the two-realm battlefield, and if it weren't the heavenly phoenix divine maiden that the little beast had encountered but only Ling Han alone, it would probably have been killed and made into a big feast. In that case, the netherworld would have gone berserk. For the sake of revenge, it was not impossible that they would bring ruin to the entire Cloud Apex planet. Ling Han wiped off his cold sweat, thinking that his love for food almost destroyed a whole planet. Wouldn't that be the highest level for a glutton? The heavenly phoenix divine maiden had a limited time she had to serve as a soldier. There were still about 2 years left of her military service, and it just so happened that it would be when the two-realm prodigy gathering would take place. Thus, Ling Han was not in a rush to leave, and continued to look for realm spirit stones in the two-realm battlefield. However, the 5 sects also similarly began hunting him down again. To recount, there were several tens of thousands of cultivators that had died from both the netherworld and the immortal realm, and in terms of their respective sects, the 5 sects were definitely those who had suffered the worst losses. That was because they had practically sent all their sun-moon tiers to this place. They could not become deserters, so all of them had joined the battlefield. With such large numbers, there were naturally many deaths as well, causing the higher-ups of the 5 sects to cry tears of blood. This was really too much of a loss. Yet they could not let Ling Han stay alive. The remaining people were still looking for Ling Han's whereabouts everywhere, and continuously hunting him down. At first, the 5 sects had mobilized a total of close to 2,000 people, and all of them were in the Sun-Moon tier, but now this number had already decreased to 1,100. The majority of them had died in the previous war, and a minority of them had been killed by Ling Han. The 5 sects again transferred over a considerable number of elites, and they were all in the peak stage of the consummate level. Some were even 2-star geniuses and above. However, the 5 sects did not have too many of such prodigies. Otherwise, Ling Han would be having a headache. On one occasion, when he threw off his pursuers, Ling Han entered into the Black Tower. Another 3 months' time had passed, and he could again undergo being tempered by the immortal flames. Ling Han took a deep breath, and determinedly threw himself into the cauldron. 3 days later, his body formed from nothing, and his appearance had changed to about a year-old toddler. Very fast improvement. Small Tower praised sincerely.
It was a rare thing for it not to taunt Ling Han, but offer him a compliment. Ling Han smiled slightly. His yearning for strength was too powerful. Under this kind of pressure, even his comprehension of the indestructible heaven scroll had been sped up considerably, and he had attained a very great improvement in this stage of rising from the ashes. He consumed a berserk blood spirit pill, and began to cultivate in seclusion underneath the reincarnation tree. This time he did not plan to go out. He was always being hunted by the 5 sects, and this was much too displeasing. He wanted to rush up to a level at which he could steamroll all the strongest elites of the 5 sects in a single go and vent his irritation. 3 days later, he digested the berserk blood spirit pill, and his cultivation level advanced to the peak stage of the medium extreme. After accumulating for a few years, he wanted to break through to the high extreme. Underneath the reincarnation tree, days would be equivalent to years, and time sped past rapidly, but Ling Han had still spent 43 days to obtain enough accumulation. He exited the Black Tower to experience the heavenly tribulation. This, on the other hand, turned out to be a small matter. He took the initiative to shatter his godly bones, improve his physique, and observe the heavenly tribulation to turn it into his own comprehension. Z. He raised his right hand, and a terrifying light of electricity surged. Shockingly, there were blue divine patterns glowing on his palm. This divine pattern looked like a lightning bolt, but if one looked closely, it seemed to consist of billions of letters. One look would cause one to become dizzy. This was martial intent obtained from observing heavenly tribulation, which took the form of a divine pattern. Only Ling Han could comprehend it, because this was his comprehension. As for others, if they gazed at it for too long, they would only be throwing up blood. Even saints would not be able to comprehend it. This was a technique that belonged only to Ling Han. Chapter 1293 The Strongest Lineup of the 5 Sects. There finally is a qualitative improvement. Ling Han was greatly pleased. Previously, though he had also been able to exude heaven's might, and use the power of heavenly tribulation, it had not taken the form of a divine pattern, which also meant that his comprehension was inadequate, and it was yet incapable of becoming an independent battle prowess. With a wave of his hand, a bolt of lightning struck and turned a tall mountain ahead of him into nothing. From a certain perspective, Ling Han had now become the embodiment of the heavenly tribulation, and possessed the ability to use it. The might of his heavenly tribulation was naturally no match for the heaven and earth, but compared with other lightning cultivators, he was a great many times stronger. I will continue in seclusion, and this time, I want to reach the consummate level. Ling Han was dead set. As long as he reached the consummate level, with the extent of his battle prowess, he would be able to defeat any elite from the 5 sects. He began to cultivate in seclusion. He went on comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree. When he got really bored, he would concoct some alchemical pills. In any case, level 8 alchemical pills were extremely time-consuming, and one concoction would take half a month. He did not need to concoct too many times, and 3 months had already passed. Immortal flame tempered his body, and he ingested the berserk blood spirit pills, then comprehended Tao again and again. In the blink of an eye, a year's time had passed quietly. Ling Han finally advanced into the consummate level. This meant that his physique had reached the strength of above level 8 godly metal, and slightly weaker than level 9. Merely that kind of defensive ability would make him practically invincible among sun-moon tiers, and presently, he could also recover the appearance of a 4 to 5-year-old boy after being tempered by the immortal flame. This improvement was extremely shocking. Even Small Tower clucked in amazement, thinking that even if the master of the Black Tower came back to life, he could not possibly do better than Ling Han. This caused Ling Han to feel overwhelmed. He was actually capable of being compared with the original master of the Black Tower. Ho ho, you are thinking too much. The Holy Saint is the extraordinary genius that has founded the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and creating a stunning divine scroll would naturally be a process of trial and error. It is impossible that he would succeed in a single go. Otherwise, with the Holy Saint's talent, he would only need to be burnt in the immortal flame 10 times to reach small accomplishment level. Small Saint beat down on Ling Han again. Fuck! Ling Han gave it the middle finger. This Tsundere Tower just loved to oppose him. However,
Now that he had finally reached the consummate level, it was about time for him to vent his anger. Furthermore, he was now also capable of suppressing the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. He. Fierce woman, just wait and see. After Ling Han stabilized his cultivation level, he began to boldly return to Wolfang City. He had gathered a great many realm spirit stones, and had concocted numerous alchemical pills as well. They could all be sold to purchase more godly metal to increase the grade of the divine demon sword. This was also his top priority. He was showing off all the way, and as expected, he was discovered by the members of the 5 sects. Very soon, a circle surrounded him. Elites came one after the other, surrounding him tightly. Damn brat, to actually dare appear so boldly and directly. Though our positions are different, I still have to admit that I am impressed. A sword-bearing man appeared, exuding an astonishing sword intent. He was a powerful member of the Heaven Sword Palace named Han Feng. He had long since reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier 1 million years ago, and he himself was a 4-star genius. After 1 million years of accumulated wisdom, though his cultivation level had not progressed one step further, his battle prowess had been increased very, very much. There was a saying whoever could take a sword strike from Han Feng, they could be called an elite in the Sun Moon tier, and it was enough to rank them in the top 100 most powerful Sun Moon tiers. This naturally was a bit of an exaggeration. After all, there were still true prodigies that had cultivated to the same level, but this kind of prodigy did not have much intersection with Han Feng, so they could not possibly spar. Thus, Han Feng's reputation was extremely well known among Sun Moon tiers. Even this kind of trump card elite had been mobilized, which showed how determined the 5 sects were to kill Ling Han. Not only was there Han Feng, there was also Chen Yi from the Absolute Saber sect, the palace leader Shi Hua from the Cloud Phoenix sect, Shangguan Qiao from Blue Thunder sect, and Tai Wuya from the Earth Dragon sect. They were all existences that were not much weaker than Han Feng, and were considered the truly most powerful figures of each respective sect. But now, all these powerful figures had actually appeared completely. The longer Ling Han had been absent, the more panicky the 5 sects were. This brat's power improved by leaps and bounds, and who knew if he would already be an elite in the consummate level if he was allowed to stay quiet for 8 to 10 years and reappear then. Consummate level. Shangguan Qiao frowned. She was already an old woman, but one could still see the beautiful outline from her wrinkled face, which showed that she must have been a calamity-level magnificent beauty in her youth. Unfortunately, time spared no one, and no matter how beautiful a woman was, there would come a day when she would become old. Over 100 people from the 5 sects all looked wary. They were worried that Ling Han would have advanced into consummate level when he reappeared after his disappearance, and this kind of worry had now become reality. Yet the time taken was so short that they could not accept this fact. It had only been 1 year. When they had seen Ling Han in the army, he was still in the late stage of the medium extreme. So what? Han Feng said proudly. He had an invincible belief that the divine sword in his hand could kill any Sun Moon tier. That's right. This time, not only have we sent out the strongest elites, we have also brought a few precious treasures and god tools. How could it be that we would be killed by this boy? Palace leader Shi Hua said coldly. She had also been a beauty in the past, but now she was unfortunately just like Shangguan Qiao, her face filled with wrinkles and her youth forever gone. Everyone, let me take the lead. Han Feng was a warlike character. Shangguan Qiao and his companions exchanged looks, and nodded to each other. Han Feng could be considered the top elite in the 5 sects as well. His battle prowess was indeed unmatchable. Of course, the height of his battle prowess did not mean that he could definitely survive to the end in a battle of life and death. In this aspect, the 4 of them were extremely confident that each of them would be the last one standing. Han Feng strode out, his hand wielding a sword. His whole body was releasing sword projections, which solidified. Wang wang wang. A round of swords appeared behind him, forming a circle. All the blades' tips were pointing outwards, and then a second round was formed, a third round, and in an instant, there were several hundred rounds formed, forming more than 10,000 sword projections. A great many disciples of the 5 sects in the surroundings immediately threw up blood. So what if they were in Sun Moon tier? They were completely incapable of bearing such sword intent. Han Feng was qualified to be called the strongest of the 5 sects, and that had not come from mere boasts. Ling Han crossed his arms behind his back, completely indifferent. There was still a piece of cloth covering his face, fully concealing his ears, nose, mouth, eyes and hair. Seeing him walk over so easily, those who didn't know would think that he was a member of the 5 sects. But the members of the 5 sects were practically scared out of their wits because when this person walked over, he brought with him a supreme aura, and they were completely incapable of resistance. No, it was not them unable to resist, but rather completely having no means of resistance. They only felt that they were as weak and tiny as an ant in front of him. Brother Faceless. Ling Han laughed loudly. His eyes swept over the newcomer, and he immediately said, "Congratulations, Brother Faceless. You have finally taken another step forward." The other had reached the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier. Chapter 1294 Dueling Han Feng. In truth, Ling Han was not capable of seeing through to Faceless cultivation level. However, the other had previously admitted that he was in the late stage of the peak, and then went into seclusion to attempt advancing into the peak stage of the pinnacle level. Now that he had come out, his aura had strengthened greatly. That meant that he must have succeeded. If not the peak stage of the pinnacle level, what else could he be? The members of the 5 sects were all frightened and angered. Why had an outsider appeared at this time? Furthermore, he looked to be Ling Han's friend as well. And this person seemed to be very, very strong. Faceless smiled and said, "After all, my discussion with Brother Ling has gifted me with enough appreciation." "Ho ho, Brother Ling. Do you have time for another discussion?" He looked to be in high spirits, paying completely no attention to the members of the 5 sects all around them. In truth, he indeed was qualified to do that. He had already cultivated to the peak stage of the pinnacle level, so he was equivalent to a heavenly body tier elite. Would an elite of the heavenly body tier take note of Sun-Moon tiers? No matter how big their numbers were, it could not possibly compensate for the great gulf between their cultivation levels. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Please wait at the side for a while, Brother Faceless. Allow me to deal with these people first." "Should I help you?" Faceless eyes swept over the masses, appearing to be incredibly carefree and relaxed. "No need." Ling Han shook his head. "All right then." Faceless nodded, and walked to the sidelines where he sat down. Han Feng and the others were all angered, but though Faceless had revealed nothing, it could still be discerned that his abilities were amazing. Hence, since he was not joining the battle, it was still best not to trifle with him. The priority now was to kill Ling Han to remove a great danger for the 5 sects. Die! Han Feng made the first move, and as his sword waved Wang, the sword projections behind him exploded. 10,000 sword projections all shot out madly at Ling Han. Faceless couldn't help but nod his head and said, "This person's not weak. Though his power is only limited to 4 stars, his sword mastery is extraordinarily high. If he has just cultivated to the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier, he may not be a match. Cultivating to the pinnacle level might still not be a match for Han Feng." This was an exceedingly high judgment, and also implied one thing. Cultivation level did not represent battle prowess. 10,000 sword projections shot out at Ling Han in a mad barrage, and every single projection possessed the might capable of killing one in the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. When these 10,000 sword projections gathered together in a single attack, even a king tier like Faceless dared not take it head-on. He would have to either parry or dodge. An experienced elite definitely did not have an undeserved reputation. Yet Ling Han raised his right hand, formed a fist, and then shot it out in a punch. Pang 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 pang. The sword projections collided into Ling Han's fist, and innumerable sparks of light appeared like a grand fireworks display. As every sword swept past, Ling Han's figure was only slightly pushed back, and when the thousands of sword projections all swept past him, Ling Han took about 100 steps back. But that was all. The skin on his fist didn't even split. The members of the 5 sects were all dumbfounded. In terms of just destructive ability, sword cultivators were definitely prominent among their peers, and Han Feng was one of the most prominent among these prominent, and had long been known for being invincible. Yet his full power strike was actually blocked so easily by a punch from Ling Han.
Who would not be gaping at that? This was nature-defying. This lowly commoner from a small world was practically nature-defying. Ling Han waved his hand around with a smile and said, "Not bad, you still have some ability it seems. I feel a little pain." Only a little pain. The members of the 5 sects did not know whether to laugh or cry. At least this strike from Han Feng still caused Ling Han to feel some pain, but it was only mere pain. It didn't even manage to break his skin. Meanwhile, Faceless rubbed his hands and laughed loudly. He said, "So it seems that Brother Ling's physique can improve along with your cultivation level. How amazing! I probably would have to use my full power to be capable of penetrating through Brother Ling's defenses." Everyone was stunned. Han Feng's full power strike was not even capable of breaking Ling Han's skin. Yet this person actually said that he could slice through Ling Han's defenses. Was this mere boasting or the truth? If it was truth, then that would be too frightening. A person like that was watching them from the sidelines, and could move for Ling Han at any time. "Don't worry, I won't make a move." Faceless smiled and said, "For pieces of trash like you all, Brother Ling alone will be able to deal with you." Fuck! Hearing him say this, all the members of the 5 sects felt a boiling killing intent against him rise up. If they were not wary of his power, there would definitely be a number who would have rushed up to attack him by now. In the territory of the 5 sects, they were used to being oppressive and tyrannical. Han Feng took a deep breath and said, "I have never been impressed by anyone, but you, brat, though you are a person that I must kill. I still have to admit that I am impressed by you. Being able to cultivate to this kind of cultivation level in a mere 10 years' time since you opened the sky, and still possess this type of power, it is indeed impressive." "No need for such hypocrisy," Ling Han said coldly. "I have obtained my battle prowess through my own effort. But what about you? Probably a great part of it is due to the realm pill, right? Old wretch, today, I will behead you and use your head as a sacrificial offering for those billions of living beings that have died so tragically." Faceless released a cold humph, and turned his stare on Han Feng. Obviously, he knew what the realm pill represented. Han Feng's killing intent blazed, and he said, "You are already close to death, and still talk too much. You should die 100 times. He tapped his forehead, and Wang, his forehead actually split open, and out flew 4 divine swords. Each divine sword was floating around him, exuding an aura that was not the slightest bit weaker than himself. User and tool becoming one. The god tool in his hands had not fused with his suns and moons, and was merely an ordinary godly weapon. Ordinarily, though tool and user becoming one could increase battle prowess, the cultivator himself would definitely be weakened. After all, he had broken up his suns and moons. But Han Feng had obviously fused all 4 suns and moons into his god tools, yet he himself seemed to be unaffected. He was still incomparably forceful. Realm pill. Ling Han thought. This had to be the benefit brought by the realm pill. As an alchemical pill that was concocted from refining billions of living beings, how could it be merely as ordinary as increasing the rate of cultivation? His killing intent boiled as well. Becoming invincible among one's peers by depending on the realm pill? This kind of so-called elite only garnered his scorn. "The one who should die is you." Ling Han roared in fury, and brandished his fists in punches at Han Feng. Wang, he directly channeled the heaven's might, exuding a supreme forcefulness that belonged to a master of his world. This was not the aura of a king tier, but had surpassed king tier. No matter how much of a king tier you were, you would still have to bend under these skies. Yet Ling Han had directly represented the will of the heaven and earth of this place. Han Feng's battle prowess suddenly decreased. Ling Han's heaven's might could weaken his opponent by a star of battle prowess in the first place, but as his heaven's might had finally reached small accomplishment, this degree of weakening had reached 2 stars. There was a gap of 3 sub-minor levels between the two of them, and Han Feng was a 4-star genius as well as a sword cultivator. With the boost given by the realm pill, his true battle prowess should be capable of surpassing 5 stars. Ling Han, meanwhile, was a 6-star genius, and taking into account the gap of 3 sub-minor levels, he was 2 stars of battle prowess weaker than the other. But the moment Heaven's Might appeared, this gap of 2 stars disappeared. This was a battle between 2 equals. Ling Han roared like thunder,
and madly delivered punches at Han Feng. There was power of lightning interwoven on his fists, and the destructive ability of his attacks was incredibly terrifying. Pang, 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 pang. He single-handedly fought Han Feng's 4 divine swords, along with Han Feng himself. The battle prowess of the 5 great individuals was about the same, and any one of them could conquer the whole mass of sun-moon tiers, but in front of Ling Han, they were not on the upper hand in the slightest. The members of the 5 sects were all twitching madly. Han Feng was the top elite of the 5 sects, and has gone through the test of time and age. Even in the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire, when one spoke of the elites of sun-moon tier, Han Feng would definitely be mentioned. But now, he was unable to defeat a rookie that had just advanced into consummate level. Everyone could not help but shudder. Could it be that the 5 great sects that had thrived for endless years would really be ruined in Ling Han's hands one day? Chapter 1295 Ancestral Weapon. Ling Han was wild with fury. Whenever he recalled the events of 10,000 years ago, when his friends and companions were treated as materials for realm pills, she would bubble with killing intent. And this person in front of him? He was the true leader of the 5 sects. He was one of the main culprits who had advocated refining realm pills. I'll kill him. Streaks of divine patterns materialized over Ling Han as martial intent coursed through his body. A profound might radiated from his body. Han Feng was stunned. His battle prowess was indeed no weaker than his opponent's. However, this youth was far too freakish. When he attacked the youth with his sword, the youth could face the attack head-on but still come out completely unscathed. At most, only his clothes would be ripped into shreds. How could he achieve victory? His reserve of origin power was limited, so what would he do once he consumed all of it? His opponent still possessed a terrifying physique, so he wouldn't need to worry about origin power at all. Meanwhile, he would become so frail that perhaps even a mountain river tier cultivator would be able to kill him. The thought of this caused intense terror to grip at his heart. Attack together. Shangguan Qiao and the 3 others had evidently noticed the precarious situation. Right now, there was no time to talk about honor and fighting one-on-one. Everyone drew their weapons and advanced toward Ling Han. Brother Ling, Faceless asked softly. No need. I can deal with them myself. Ling Han said with overflowing confidence. What an arrogant brat. I'll send you to your afterlife in hell. Palace leader Shi Hua said with a humph. A pair of phoenix wings that measured 600 meters in length unfurled behind her. Looking closely, however, one could see that the color of the phoenix wings was slightly patchy and uneven. Moreover, the divine flames that enveloped them were also lacking in purity. Sure enough, her bloodline was far inferior to the heavenly phoenix divine maidens. You stole the words right out of my mouth, Ling Han said. He let out a long roar before unleashing his full battle prowess. 9 divine dragons danced around his body. When engaging in close-quarter combat, he could flawlessly integrate his stamina with his origin power. This was because fighting in such a way didn't require any techniques. All he needed to do was pummel his enemies. His method of fighting was simple and violent, yet it was effective and profoundly powerful. Pang 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 pang. So what if he was being attacked by 5 elites? Ling Han suppressed them all and forced them to stumble back in retreat. His physique was far too powerful, and this allowed him to go on a full-on offensive without paying any attention to his defenses. His relentless attack meant that his enemies were barely able to hang on. After all, one would still have some holes in their defenses no matter how powerful they were, and once these holes appeared before Ling Han, that would be their death sentence. Pang! Ling Han's fist slammed into Tai Wuya's face, causing half of it to shatter and disappear. Even his divine sense was severely wounded. Tai Wuya groaned in pain as he frantically retreated into the distance. He needed to leave this battlefield to treat his wounds. However, how could Ling Han let him flee? Injuring all of a man's fingers was not as effective as chopping off one. He relentlessly chased after Tai Wuya. Summon the god tools. Han Feng shouted frantically. To his side, there were 5 groups of 5 sects disciples, each consisting of 10 members. Each group summoned a god tool. There was a sword, a saber, a mirror, a comb, and a pair of scissors. Wang! The god tools absorbed an exorbitant amount of power, causing the 50 disciples who had summoned them to instantly collapse on the ground in exhaustion. Their faces were deathly pale, and it was as if they had all been brought down by a severe illness. Meanwhile, the 5 god tools awoke and radiated with a devastating and vicious aura. Faceless was stunned, and he said, "Brother Ling, the might of these god tools has likely reached the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier already. Moreover, they've probably reached the middle stage. Are you sure you don't need my help?" If the 5 sects wanted to suppress Ling Han, they would naturally need to unleash the full power of these god tools. However, this wouldn't last long, as these god tools would gradually weaken after a short while. After all, these 5 god tools had been passed down for far too long. As a result, the divine patterns within them had already worn out and completely vanished. Although they still retained their might, the amount of time they could be activated for was far below that in the past. Maintain these god tools as if your lives depend on it. Chapter 1296 Can T kill him no matter what? Faceless couldn't understand Ling Han's determination to fight alone. The situation was already so dire, so why was he still unwilling to ask for help? In a few breaths' time at most, Ling Han would definitely be killed. The members of the 5 sects were all holding their breaths. They had paid a huge price, and almost everyone had shaved 10,000 years off their lifespan. This was the moment they were all waiting for. Die! Hurry up and die! The 5 god tools slammed down together. Their pinnacle-level battle prowess was devastating, and the divine light that radiated from them enveloped and drowned Ling Han. Fuck yeah! We've finally killed him! Long live the 5 sects! The disciples of the 5 sects all whooped in joy. From today onward, they would finally be able to sleep in peace again. Faceless faltered for a moment. Then, a faint smile immediately spread across his face. His divine sense was extremely sensitive, and he had already sensed the change taking place within the sea of surging divine light. Under Han Feng and the others' control, the 5 god tools all deactivated and returned to their original resting positions. However, the ensuing scene sowed despair into their hearts. Instead of a flattened mush of flesh, what entered their vision was the sight of Ling Han standing tall and proud, not a single wound on his body. It was as if he wasn't the person battling against them just then. This. How is this possible? To say nothing of the members of the 5 sects, even Faceless was absolutely stunned. Although he had sensed that Ling Han hadn't died, he hadn't been able to determine how Ling Han had escaped the deadly crisis. He could only conclude that Ling Han possessed an insane recovery ability, one that could heal his wounds and return him to the peak of his powers in an instant. This was obviously thanks to the indestructible true fluid. After circulating a drop, Ling Han had naturally returned to normal. Ling Han smiled widely and said, "Please continue. What are you all acting so polite for?" "Who's acting polite?" The disciples of the 5 sects wanted to cry, yet no tears were coming forth. They had already sacrificed tens of thousands of years of their lifespan. If they activated the 5 god tools again, wouldn't they have to sacrifice several tens of thousands of years more of their lifespan? One had to realize that even cultivators at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier only possessed a lifespan of 4 million years. In any case, many of the disciples present were only at the low extreme. Thus, the theoretical maximum of their lifespan was only 1 million years. How many more times could they sacrifice their lifespan? Continue to activate the ancestral weapons. We must kill this evil brat. Tai Wuya shouted from the side. After some emergency treatment, he had finally managed to regain some of his battle prowess. At the very least, he would be able to control the god tools. The disciples of the 5 sects all grumbled in their minds. Those 5 elites only needed to control the god tools, yet the people who were sacrificing their lifespan were them. Why was it them who needed to pay with their lifespan? However, did they have a choice right now? If Ling Han didn't die, they would become the ones who would die. However, if they gave it their all to kill Ling Han, they would only lose a portion of their lifespan. This was better than dying, right? Fuck it! The disciples started to activate the God tools again, injecting their origin power into them. When they ran out of origin power, they would reluctantly allow their vitality to be sucked away. Wang! Divine light burst from the 5 God tools again, releasing an aura of invincibility. Ling Han humphed and said, "It's useless even if you activate these God tools 100 more times. Today is the day that I'm going to serve justice and exact revenge for the lower realm." "Quit dreaming," Han Feng and the others said coldly. As long as they could activate the 5 God tools, they could continue to suppress Ling Han. Moreover, they refused to believe that Ling Han could recover without limit. The 5 God tools unleashed their fury at Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han actively channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll. If he suffered minor wounds, he would be able to recover immediately. If he suffered more severe wounds, he could still heal and turn them into minor wounds. After a short while, these minor wounds would also recover. After comprehending a tiny portion of Rising from the Ashes' profound mysticality, his recovery ability was also starting to become increasingly freakish. Moreover, this still wasn't the full might of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Not only did the indestructible Heaven Scroll bestow him a powerful recovery ability, but it even allowed his physique to become freakishly tough. According to the words of Small Tower, channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll after reaching the heavenly body tier and comprehending the secret techniques of the primal chaos origin beast, 1000 transformations tortoise, and diamond ant would allow him to block a single strike from a saint. Of course, he could only block a single strike. After blocking a single strike, Ling Han definitely wouldn't have enough energy to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll again. However, this was still incredibly frightening. A heavenly body tier elite blocking a single strike of a saint? This was heaven-defying. Anyhow, Ling Han could only comprehend this portion of the indestructible Heaven Scroll after advancing one major tier and reaching the heavenly body tier. At that time, he would also gain access to the 5th level of the Black Tower and unlock all 5 of the elements. As a result, the Black Tower would also be able to simulate more celestial-level environments. Boom! 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 Attacks rained down on Ling Han as the 5 God tools continued to unleash their might. These God tools were trying to kill him, yet Ling Han still had the spare energy to let his mind wander. After channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll, there was a golden glow around his body, making it appear as if he were an invincible war god. He was incredibly relaxed, yet the people from the 5 sects were all fighting as if their lives depended on it. The disciples continued to channel their vitality into the 5 God tools, so that they could continue to unleash their full power. If they slacked off even a tiny bit, these God tools would lose their ability to wound Ling Han. They were truly fighting with their lives. Ling Han chuckled coldly. Generation after generation of lower realm beings had been killed to refine realm pills. Meanwhile, the people in front of him right now had all ingested such realm pills. He was going to kill these people slowly and painfully. The battle raged on. From the perspective of the 5 sects, this battle was incredibly intense and precarious. If they relented even a little, Ling Han would have the chance to escape from their grasp. However, they gradually became weaker and weaker as time trickled away. The God tools were absorbing their vitality in a snowballing manner. In other words, it was demanding more and more of their vitality for the same amount of power with the passing of time. Many disciples were sucked dry of their vitality. Apart from being able to blink their eyes from time to time, they looked almost exactly like lifeless corpses. They were already running out of vitality to provide. However, the 5 God tools were still voracious in their demand for more energy. Oh no, it wasn't the 5 God tools that were demanding energy. It was Han Feng and the 4 other elites who were controlling the God tools and making them demand more energy. In Han Feng and the other elites' eyes, everyone apart from them could be sacrificed. As long as they could kill Ling Han, everything would be worth it. Compared to killing Ling Han, what was the life of a few hundred Sun-Moon tier elites worth? However, they were destined to be disappointed. Ling Han circulated another drop of indestructible true fluid. Chapter 1297 2 Realm Prodigy Gathering is near. Brother Ling, You're truly extraordinary, Faceless said from the bottom of his heart. If we battle at the same cultivation level, I truly can't say that I'll be able to defeat you. After witnessing Ling Han's incredible physique and recovery ability, Faceless was still only saying that he couldn't necessarily defeat Ling Han. In other words, he was confident that he himself wouldn't be defeated. From this, it was clear that he had some astonishing trump card up his sleeves. He had reached the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier, after all, so how could he be an also-ran? Just like how there were fewer Sun-Moon tier cultivators than Mountain River tier cultivators, and just like how there were fewer Heavenly Body tier cultivators than Sun-Moon tier cultivators, there were naturally fewer cultivators at the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier than cultivators at the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier. The higher the cultivation level, the more difficult it would be to reach. This was also the case for the pinnacle level. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, I'll definitely cultivate earnestly and strive to advance to the same level as Brother Faceless as soon as possible. When that time comes, we can spar to our heart's content. Faceless didn't find Ling Han's goal exaggerated at all. The lower one's cultivation level, the less time it would take to advance. However, after reaching the Heavenly Body tier, even advancing one minor level would take several million years. To say nothing of a few years, even 1 million years wouldn't seem like a long time. Of course, prodigies like them probably wouldn't need to take several million years to advance one minor level. Perhaps tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years would be enough. However, would Ling Han need tens of thousands of years to close the gap between their cultivation levels? By the looks of it, you'll catch up to me in no time if I don't cultivate earnestly, Faceless said with a smile. Oh, that's right. Brother Faceless, did you come here to participate in the Two-Realm Prodigy Gathering? Ling Han asked. I've heard that there's a supreme prodigy called Yu Ying on Cloud Apex Planet. So, I've come here in the hopes of meeting prodigies from the Netherworld and also sparring with this Yu Ying, Faceless replied. He paused for a moment before continuing. However, since I've met Brother Ling, I'm in no hurry to search for Yu Ying anymore. King tiers like Faceless would travel far and wide in search of fellow king tiers to challenge. The aim of doing this was to identify the flaws in their own cultivation and temper it to perfection from this. Moreover, the only people who could place them under enough pressure to improve were naturally fellow king tiers. Other people were far too weak to be helpful. Although Ling Han was slightly weaker, Faceless would have no chance of victory if he suppressed his cultivation while battling against him. Thus, these battles were still very helpful to him. More importantly, his discussions with Ling Han about Dao had given him a huge amount of inspiration. Yu Ying, Ling Han murmured in his mind. Why did the king tiers of this generation have a habit of coming up with strange names? Faceless, Yu Ying, and what not? None of them seemed like legitimate names. Brother Faceless, I plan on returning to Wolfang City first. What about you? I've got nothing to do, so I'll probably just go with you. The two of them returned to Wolfang City, and Ling Han sold his huge stash of realm spirit stones to the Gold Origin auction house. He didn't auction them, but instead sold them directly. As to how the auction house dealt with them, that wasn't something for him to worry about. Of course, this huge stash was only relative to what other people could obtain. In reality, it wasn't actually all that much. However, it was still astonishing that a single person could obtain so many realm spirit stones. After purchasing a huge amount of godly metal, Ling Han started to raise the quality of his divine demon sword. When the Netherworld had invaded, Ling Han had followed the army and killed numerous Netherworld elites. After killing them, he had naturally collected their weapons as well. Moreover, the soldiers from the Netherworld had all been Sun-Moon tier cultivators at a minimum. Thus, the weapons that he had collected were all forged from at least level 5 godly metal. Although level 5 godly metal was already useless to him, he could sell these and use the money to purchase level 6 godly metal. In any case, he had sold some alchemical pills as well, and this had earned him an astonishing amount of wealth. This had allowed him to purchase a large amount of level 6 godly metal. However, it was a shame that the divine demon sword didn't advance to level 7 even after absorbing all of the godly metal. By the looks of it, it was only 2/3 of the way to level 7. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a little gloomy. He continued to discuss Dao with Faceless. After 10 days, Faceless felt like he had learned a lot, so he decided to cultivate in seclusion for a short while. He would stabilize his pinnacle-level cultivation once and for all. After the two-realm prodigy gathering, he would start to strive toward the heavenly body tier. In the meantime, Ling Han decided to refine some pills. He needed money at this moment, money to purchase level 6 godly metal. He had to raise the divine demon sword to level 7 no matter what. Raising it to level 8 would be impossible as he only had less than 1 year remaining. Back in the Black Tower, the azure flame vulture chick had already grown to a huge size. When it extended its wingspan was already as wide as a human was tall. Moreover, it always perched itself on the reincarnation tree, where it could occasionally receive guidance from a saint. This caused the azure flame vulture to appear extraordinary. It was only 1 year old, yet it had already advanced to the spiritual ocean tier. This was extremely astonishing. Of course, this cultivation was still too weak for the azure flame vulture to be of any help to Ling Han. However, it was powerful enough to act as a messenger that traveled between the Purple Moon Army and Wulfeng City, delivering love letters for Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Being able to fly in the immortal realm was still very impressive. Ling Han planned to put some effort into raising this azure flame vulture. Perhaps it could reach the Sun Moon tier or even Heavenly Body tier in the future with him. The Alchemy Emperor, present, things like bloodline and whatnot completely didn't matter. Alchemy became Ling Han's bread and butter. In order to earn money, he even started to refine Berserk Blood Spirit pills. He would hand these to the Gold Origin auction house to auction. This caused some waves in Wulfeng City. After all, Berserk Blood Spirit pills were the holy pill of the Sun Moon tier. Instantly advancing one subminor level could save one tens of thousands of years of time. This meant that one would gain tens of thousands of years of time to comprehend the Great Tao and strive toward a higher cultivation level. Immortals had long lifespans, yet time was still incredibly precious. If one didn't break through before their lifespan shriveled, their only fate would be death. Who wasn't afraid of death? The higher the status one enjoyed, the more they wouldn't want to die. This was even more so for immortals, who enjoyed a transcendent status over ordinary people. In fact, they could kill countless ordinary beings with a mere snap of their fingers. Which one of them didn't want to live as long as heaven and earth? Thus, Berserk Blood Spirit pills were extremely popular. However, it was a pity that refining such pills would take half a month for each cauldron, and each cauldron would only produce one pill. Moreover, the wealth of Sun Moon tier cultivators was naturally no match for the wealth of Heavenly Body tier and Eternal River tier cultivators. As a result, Ling Han wouldn't make as much money as he had from the palm-sized Realm Spirit Stone even if he sold 6 Berserk Blood Spirit pills at once. Fortunately, there was still enough time to refine more pills. Ling Han believed that he could probably earn enough money to buy all the level 6 godly metal he needed for raising the Divine Demon Sword to level 7 before the two-realm prodigy gathering started. Battling against the 5 sects had made him understand one thing. These forces that had inheritances of several million years all had trump cards, and were not to be underestimated. Thus, he had to focus on raising his strength. Because of his peculiar situation right now, he didn't need to explore any ancient sites. All he needed to do was wait for 3 months and then enter the cauldron of immortal flames to temper his body again. After that, he could eat a Berserk Blood Spirit pill and watch his cultivation soar up in leaps and bounds. Middle stage of the consummate level, late stage, peak stage. After reaching the peak stage of the consummate level, the two-realm prodigy gathering was finally about to begin. At the same time, Ling Han also received some good news. Firstly, he had finally accumulated enough level 6 godly metal to raise the Divine Demon Sword to level 7. Secondly, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had also completed her military service and regained her freedom. However, she wouldn't leave the two-realm battlefield. This was because the Xie clan had never stated that they would let her off for escaping her marriage. Xie Donglai falling out of favor was one thing. However, her escaping marriage was a slap to the Xie clan's face. So, how could the Xie clan let her off? Fortunately, the two-realm prodigy gathering was also going to be held in the two-realm battlefield. Thus, she wouldn't need to risk leaving this area. After this gathering, she could still remain in the Purple Moon Army and wait until she could leave the Cloud Apex planet together with Ling Han. In any case, this wasn't too bad either. No matter what, she was still a member of the Cloud Phoenix sect.
Personally witnessing Ling Han destroy them would inevitably feel strange. Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden headed toward the mountain river forest. Yuing literally means moon shadow. Chapter 1298 Gathering of Prodigies. The mountain river forest was the location of the two-realm prodigy gathering. However, not everyone could enter this place. In fact, it was quite the contrary. Whether or not one could enter the mountain river forest was the first test, and this was a test that would eliminate many who believed that they were prodigies. Only true prodigies could enter. This was a vast land, yet it was shrouded by the regulations of heaven and earth all year round, preventing anyone from setting foot inside. Even saints were no exception to this. Every 77,777 years, the regulations would undergo a peculiar change that made it non-lethal. However, such a change would only last for a mere 15 days. Even so, the fact still remained that only the most brilliant of prodigies would have the right to enter. The regulations of heaven and earth would become non-lethal, but entering the mountain river forest would still be an impossible task for ordinary cultivators. Similarly, the regulations enveloping the Sun-Moon Valley would also undergo change once every 77,777 years. However, this would occur 33,333 years after the mountain river forest. Thus, the two-realm prodigy gathering would be held at the mountain river forest first, then at the Sun-Moon Valley 33,333 years later. After 44,444 years, the gathering would return to the mountain river forest. Because such a gathering was only held once in tens of thousands of years, the prodigies from both the realms treated it with extreme importance. Not only could they compete against prodigies from another realm, but they could even compete against prodigies from their own realm. Take, for example, Faceless. Under normal circumstances, would he come to the Cloud Apex planet for no reason? The clash between the prodigies from the two realms could, to a certain degree, reflect the strengths and weaknesses of each realm. This was also part of the reason why the higher-ups of the two realms encouraged the prodigies from their realm to attend the two-realm prodigy gathering. Those who achieved outstanding results could even receive rich rewards. In truth, Ling Han's motivation for attending this gathering was in large part due to these rich rewards. The two imperial empires had released a joint announcement, promising a reward of a level 10 godly metal if one could win first place for the immortal realm. From level 9 onwards, godly metal was extremely scarce and hard to obtain. If Ling Han wanted to elevate his divine demon sword to the celestial level, each piece of godly metal would be of utmost importance. Right now, his only wish was that the divine demon sword could become slightly less gluttonous in the future. Although the mountain river forest was called a forest, there was only one point of entry. Moreover, this entrance was a canyon. Right now, this canyon was still sealed off by the regulations of heaven and earth. As such, no one was able to enter. In a few days, the regulations of heaven and earth would gradually open up, allowing those who possessed extraordinary talent to enter. If one wasn't a supreme prodigy, all they could do was gaze at the canyon and sigh. In any case, this canyon was extremely difficult to cross. If one stubbornly pushed themselves beyond their limit, it was entirely possible that they would end up dead. Because there were only a few days left until the regulations opened up, there were already mountains of people gathered here. Some had come to attend the two-realm prodigy gathering, while others had come to witness a spectacle. This was an event that they could brag about for hundreds of years to come. Everyone here was an immortal as well, so the weather didn't bother them a single bit, be it rain, hail, or shine. They remained sitting or standing as they patiently waited for the regulations to open up. Meanwhile, the old ginseng had already run off to cause mischief among the women. As for Rabbit, his eyes were set on others' fanny packs. If he detected any valuable medicine inside of them, he would definitely seize an opportunity to grab them, even if it meant tailing his victim for several days on end. Only the freshly hatched azure flame vulture was relatively well behaved. It stood behind Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, spreading its wings from time to time to groom its feathers. It appeared extremely magnificent, and it exuded a slight air of pride. Ling Han named it Little Qing. In any case, those who followed him were all his juniors anyway. I've heard that even Yong Lin will attend this time. Gasp! For real? Who's Yang Lin? It can't be, right? You don't even know who Yang Lin is?
He's the #1 prodigy of the plentiful planet. People refer to him as the invincible King Tyr, and he's a personal disciple of the Nine River Venerate. Not only that, but it's even rumored that he had an extraordinary encounter and obtained a damaged Saint Tool.
Pooh! Saint Tool.
Of course, Yang Lin is truly blessed by the fortune of heaven. That Saint Tool actually recognized him as its master. Although it's damaged, it still possesses a terrifying might. I've heard that it's on par with elites at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier and can even suppress elites at the low extreme. Don't forget that Yang Lin is only at the Sun-Moon tier right now. Once he advances to the heavenly body tier, perhaps he'll even be able to suppress eternal river tier elites.
Gasp!
Such a terrifying person actually exists? But if he obtained a Saint Tool, why didn't other elites try to snatch it off him?
Yeah, why didn't they?
There's no way eternal river tier elites would have been afraid of him, right?
Hey!
Do you people understand what a Saint Tool is? If a Saint Tool is uninterested in you, what will it matter even if you're an eternal river tier elite? Would you be able to subdue the Saint Tool? Even if one does manage to kill Yang Lin, they'll still come up empty-handed. Not only that, but they would have offended the Nine River Venerate as well.
That's right.
The Nine River Venerate is extremely scary. According to rumors, he's already at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. Moreover, he's currently cultivating toward the Genesis tier. Even if we cast our gaze over the entire Long Light Galaxy, such kinds of supreme elites definitely won't number more than 10.
Everyone nodded in agreement.
Apart from a select few people, even elites at the Eternal River tier wouldn't dare to target Yang Lin. In any case, those who possessed such formidable power and were cultivating toward the Genesis tier wouldn't be interested in a damaged Saint Tool anyway. Once they successfully advanced to the Genesis tier, they would have the ability to forge Saint Tools themselves. Ling Han was also listening to this conversation, and he committed Yang Lin's name to memory.
Yang Lin.
He's most likely a formidable opponent who's on the same level as Faceless. Given what you've all said, I gather that Yang Lin will suppress the prodigies of both realms and emerge as the king among kings.
Not necessarily.
I've heard that the White Horse planet's Thousand-Peak Imperial Empire also has a super genius. This super genius is the only child of the Imperial Emperor, and her name is Cloud. She's only cultivated for 200 years, yet she's already reached the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier.
Yes, that's right. I've also heard about her.
People often refer to her as the Cloud Maiden. Ever since she started cultivating, she's participated in 376 battles with 0 losses. Not only that, but all of her opponents had a huge advantage in cultivation level. Hee, don't forget guys, we also have a young king tier on our Cloud Apex planet.
Ling Han. Hey, who's Ling Han?
Is he worthy of being mentioned alongside these other king tiers? The young king tier I was referring to is the Blue Cloud Imperial Empire's Yu Ying. Yu Ying is indeed worthy of being labeled as a young king tier. She's invincible among those of her generation, and also among those at the same cultivation level. She genuinely possesses an aura of invincibility. Guys, don't underestimate Ling Han.